At first, our hero, dubbed the Warrior of Death, follows the principle of returning favors twice and taking revenge tenfold. But he finds himself bound to demonic swords transformed into strange girls. As events escalate, he faces his fate alongside these girls and resolves to eliminate all who stand in his way. On a journey filled with chaos and fighting, a desperate man begs for mercy and asks what he can offer as he is about to be killed again. He asks what he needs to do to be allowed to leave. However, with an evil look, the white-haired man says he only wants his neck, nothing more, and strikes with his sword. He stands motionless amid the chaotic scene he has left behind. Pondering his mission, he reaches inside his coat, pulls out a lighter, and contemplates his cigar, which he throws into the flames. He heads off, thinking he must return as quickly as possible to report on the mission. Some time passes, and he is still running, exhausted, because he has not stopped moving. He passes through a forest, stops, complaining that he is getting tired because he has to finish things here and report on the mission. This person is Sig, but he senses something coming towards him. At the last moment, he dodges an attack aimed at him. He looks to the side, noting that the attack was so powerful that it easily cut a giant tree in half. This attack was from a monster that had just appeared, an orc to be precise. Eager for battle, the orc roars, making Sig wonder in surprise, how can that orc look like a wild animal? Looking at the sword the orc carries, he imagines that the weak aura and unsteady movements were due to the cursed demon sword. The sword emanated a dark energy. The orc immediately prepares to fight, as does Sig, who feels uneasy as the orc approaches him with bloodshot eyes. The orc attacks the hero with his demonic sword. Sig dodges the attack, but notices that as he avoids it, the attack strikes the trees behind him, cutting them down with ease. He realizes that the orc was only trying to show off the power of his sword. The orc continues to launch numerous strikes, but thanks to his agility, the hero is able to counter them all without much difficulty. Sig takes a stance on one of the stumps cut down by the orc's attacks. He gathers energy so that his next strike will be very effective. He looks at the orc and notices that he is angry, but he wastes no time and advances, ending his attack with his sword directly on the orc's face. But he realizes that the blow was too superficial and that the orc has already begun to regenerate, making him even angrier. Tired from the last attack, Sig thinks that this is not worth the effort and that as soon as he returns, he will ask the old man to double his pay. He thinks about this and notices that the orc is already in front of him, ready to attack. They both attack at once, creating a shockwave with their swords. The impact destroys the area beneath them, and the orc's sword begins to break Seg's sword, causing him to quickly pull his sword back. But the orc's blow was so powerful that it broke his sword and caused him to dodge the attack. Sig runs after the orc and, with a vicious look, strikes with what remains of his sword, severing the orc's head. The hero sits down on a log, letting out a sigh of relief because he was reaching his limit. But then he begins to hear a voice asking him to follow it. The voice continues to call him, arousing his curiosity because it seems that the orc's demonic sword is calling him. He looks at the sword, which emits a dark aura, and continues to say that it will give him the power to kill anything and allow him to settle any grudges if he takes it. He begins to walk toward it. Sig tries to resist, imagining that he cannot take that sword because if he does, he will end up like the orc, dead on the ground with his head severed. Standing in front of the sword, he finds everything extremely frustrating because he cannot control his body. He reaches out to pick it up, trying with all his might to resist. However, he grabs it, unleashing a dark power. The sword begins to persuade him, calling him to kill and to feel hatred toward everything around him. But he changes his expression, leaving the sword in a state of confusion. He walks close to a lake, and the sword asks him to wait a moment so they can talk first. He raises the sword and throws it toward the lake. When it falls into the lake, he turns his back, yawning, as the demonic sword sinks into the water. Some time passes, and the hero has already reported on the mission. He takes a deep breath as the old man scolds him, saying he wants proof that the orc was carrying a demon sword and that he should stop trying to deceive him. Sig, with his reward in hand, thinks the old man is very stingy. He leaves, grumbling that with this reward, he won't be able to buy another sword. But he doesn't notice that there is someone in front of him. A girl with black hair stands in front of him, her arms crossed, looking at him angrily. Sig walks past her, wondering if she might be a lost child. She grabs him immediately, saying, "How dare you get rid of my master?" He starts to smile, saying that she must be mistaken, and pulls his arm away, saying that he is leaving. He leaves the girl stunned. She starts to feel upset and shouts, "How dare you touch me and then pretend you don't know me?" Hearing this, he stops immediately and turns around, asking if she is crazy to say such unreasonable things. but he quickly realizes that everyone around him is looking at him with disapproval. How could he touch a girl? Angry at her, he asks Sig why she is doing this to him. She raises her finger, asking, "How dare you throw me into the lake?" Hearing this, he is shocked because she cannot be the sword. Afraid of what she might say, he raises a finger, asking if she is that sword. Smiling, she says yes, she is the demon sword he had gotten rid of. The demonic sword Minerva amplifies the user's hatred, becoming a demonic sword of hatred, granting great power and renewal. However, the user will go mad as their hatred continuously increases. Minerva tells the hero that he seems to lack self-awareness as a servant, but before she finishes her explanation, she realizes that he has already disappeared, making her look ridiculous as she talks to herself. She looks back, and Sig takes a deep breath, thinking that he may have managed to get rid of her, but he soon notices that she is beside him, asking him if he really thought he could escape. He is stunned by this, asking who exactly she is, and how she found him so quickly. Minerva explains that she is a queen, and that wherever he is, she will be there whenever she wants. This leaves him surprised as she continues to say that he apparently doesn't believe her, but she is the queen and he is the servant. Angry, he shouts, asking what this servant business is all about. She just smiles, asking if he really doesn't know, but explains that it is natural for an individual to become a servant the moment they bear a queen. Seg turns his back, saying he's going crazy, leaving her angry because she's been left talking to herself. He simply asks her to stop joking around and go home. She starts saying that the hero has been rude since the lake, which makes him turn around as he notices a dark energy. With an evil smile, she introduces herself, saying that this queen's name is Minerva, telling him to take a good look at her true form, leaving the hero in a state of shock. Minerva then asks him to kneel and show respect to his queen. Immediately, he grabs her by the arm and asks her to follow him. In response, she starts yelling at him for treating her this way, as she is the queen and he is her servant. Sig arrives with Minerva while someone asks what happened to the person who said he would never return here. Embarrassed, he replies that he is here to deal with the demonic sword. He leaves her in a state of disbelief that he is doing this to her. The old man extends his hand, asking if this is real and where the demon sword island. Sig grabs Minerva by the arms, saying that this character is the demon sword. However, the old man says nothing, not believing that he is wasting his time. Sage realizes that the old man has become angry and tries to explain that it really is the demon sword, and that he even threw it into the lake. But for some reason, it appeared next to him. However, both the old man and the hero turn away because Minerva is crying, saying that it is more than she can handle. Even though it may be a problem, he should not try to sell it. Upon saying that, Sig notices that the old man is angry. Immediately, he yells at him to get out of there. Outside, the hero suffers from a severe headache because he cannot solve the problem. Manhwa is still upset, asking Sig how he dared to try to sell it to her. Sig asks her why she is doing this to him. Manhwa begins to explain, saying that the moment he took it, they were supposed to stay together until the end of their lives. Sig looks up, takes a deep breath, imagining that he has nothing to do. The next day, they set off on a journey. Sig nibbles on candy, thinking that he doesn't want to go to the city. But when he looks at Minerva, he imagines that because of her, he will no longer be able to accept assignments from the guild in his village. He gets her attention, saying that she had mentioned that she was a demon sword. How could she turn into a person? She becomes pensive as she replies that she doesn't know, that she just can, and asks how he managed to escape her control. Seg replies that he doesn't know either, he just did it. Both of them become pensive at his answer. The car stops and the driver informs them that they have arrived. They get out and thank the driver for taking them. The hero also thanks the driver for the ride and hands him a letter, saying that if he is interested in an escort job, he should visit Rostop. After saying this, he bids them farewell and continues on his way. Noticing that the hero hangs his head, Minerva calls him a fool and asks him why he doesn't do the same with her. With a wicked look, he says he won't do the same with her and starts walking toward the city, telling her that if she doesn't like it, she can stay alone. She starts running after him, shouting for him to wait. Already, in the most important city in the province of Seas, Ebelm, Minerva is amazed by everything, noting that humans have also evolved a lot. While she is observing everything around her, Seg tells her that she looks like a peasant by the way she looks at things. After walking through the city, they finally arrive at their destination. She asks if he is going to try to sell her again, but he just tells her to be quiet and calm down. He starts to open the door, and Minerva watches him, noticing that he is strangely nervous, and asks him if he has some kind of plan. When they enter the tavern, a red-haired woman greets him. Sig approaches her and says he wants to accept a job. She asks him first to verify his identity and asks him to present his ID card. He hands her the card and she asks if the name is Sig. Then she screams, asking him if he is Sig, the Death Warrior, leaving everyone there shocked to hear the name. Embarrassed, he tries to cover his face, asking only for the list of tasks. She agrees and gives him the list. As the hero looks at the list of tasks, people begin to wonder if he really is the Death Warrior, as it has been a long time since he last appeared. Sig hands back the list of tasks, saying he wants that mission. She tries to explain that the mission is complicated, but he interrupts her, saying it's not a problem, he wants it anyway. She gives him the application letter, and he leaves immediately. While people are shocked by his presence there, Sig is one of the 5 great warriors. As he leaves, he tells Minerva that this is why he didn't want to go to the city. However, he notices that she is trembling all over, and laughs at her. Some time passes, and they are walking in the forest, while Minerva continues to tease him, calling him the Warrior of Death. He asks her to stop calling him that, but she continues to provoke him. A few minutes earlier, they went to the house of a lady who thanked them for coming because she was worried since there had been no news since the mission was posted. While Minerva was playing, the hero was focused on the mission, unable to figure out what to do. She told them that all she could do was trust them. Minerva looks up and tells her not to worry because she will find him no matter what. Looking at the picture, she says that the cat will be with her again soon. At that moment, the hero gives Minerva a light tap on the head, causing a huge ball to appear, because she kept calling him the Warrior of Death. Infuriated with the lady, he thinks that she closed the entire park because of the cat. She continues to tease him, saying, "How can a warrior look for a cat?" He immediately loses his temper and yells at her angrily that it's all her fault. She asks him why he should blame her. He replies that he broke his sword and now he has to take on this task in order to buy another one. How can he complete the tasks without a sword? However, she says, "What do you mean, you don't have a sword?" Which makes him think about it. Smiling, she asks him, "Don't you have me here?" While he remains silent, thinking. She asks him to think carefully because, if he can carry her, wouldn't he become the strongest? This surprises him, imagining that if what she says is true, things will be different. He imagines himself surrounded by defeated enemies. However, he raises his hand and taps Manhua on the forehead, telling her to stop acting like a child and behave appropriately. Her eyes begin to fill with tears because the tap hurt her, but she quickly becomes angry and yells at the hero, calling him mean. Sage stops, sensing that something is wrong. Looking around, he notices that it is unusually quiet, even for an enclosed garden, where even the usual sound of birds has disappeared. He wonders if there is a vicious demon in that place, because if there is, he will be in big trouble, especially since he is not carrying a sword at the moment. As he ponders this, a tiger suddenly appears beside him, ready to attack. The tiger pounces, sending him flying through the air and causing a huge explosion. Minerva grabs the dust cloud and pulls away, watching the beast's huge paw. When he looks closely, he wonders if it's a saber-toothed tiger. He begins to remember that the mission was classified as Type A and wonders if the little cat is actually that tiger. When he looks at the tiger's mark, he realizes that it really was the little cat. Manhwa, who is watching everything that is happening, expresses the complexity of the situation, but Sig knocks her down, causing her to fall face first onto the ground, yelling that he is stupid for doing so. Manhwa sees Sig bend down, pick up a branch, and tell her to back off or she will get hurt. He says this, but doesn't notice that the tiger is advancing directly toward him, ready to attack. Manhwa freezes in place at the sight. Seg begins attacking the tiger with the branch, landing several consecutive blows. She is amazed to see the hero performing all those moves with just a branch, repeatedly targeting the huge tiger. After a few moments of fighting, the tiger shakes on the ground. Seg approaches with an intimidating presence. He notices that the tiger is trembling all over. He finds this strange because the saber-toothed tiger is an intelligent creature, so it should surrender when it senses the difference in strength between them. The hero throws down his branch, thinking that if the tiger continues to fight like this, there can only be one reason. He thinks about it and soon notices several tiger cubs climbing on their mother, confirming his theory. She was only aggressive because of her young. She looks at the hero and tries to attack him, but he asks her to calm down because he has no intention of hurting her. In fact, they are there because Mrs. Marcianes was worried about them. He takes a deep breath and collapses on the ground, smiling, saying he understands why the little cat is called that. She begins to lick the hero's face, excited with joy. Some time passes, and Seg takes the little cat to Marcianes, who scolds her, saying that she just likes to cause trouble. But she notices that the tiger had several cubs with him, so she is happy, thanking him for completing the request and calling him the Warrior of Death. He remains silent, while Minerva bites the hero's head, wondering how Marcianes knows his name. He says that he spent a long time traveling to the countryside to hide his identity. She smiles, saying that it is very difficult for nobles to easily forget a name like his. Marcianus changes the subject, asking what the relationship between them island. He replies that Manhwa is just a stranger, and Manhwa laughs, saying that he is just her servant. But immediately, the two start arguing, prompting Marcianus to comment that their relationship is very strange. Seeing the cup of tea on the table, the hero asks why she named the tiger Kitten. She explains that when she first met the creature, she really thought it was a cat. However, even now, it is still as cute as a kitten, even though others do not see it that way. The kitten plays around, saying that it may have run away from home because of that, thinking that it no longer belonged there. Marcianus takes the opportunity to ask for a favor, wanting to take the tiger to its original home, which surprises the hero when he hears it. He asks Seg if she is talking about the tiger's home, the Sabir. She replies that yes, that is exactly the place she was thinking of, the farthest region in the east. Segmir is still in the city of Iblim. People are terrified by what they see. The hero thinks it's a nightmare. How can he hide a group of tigers in the city? Minerva feels important, as humans cannot take their eyes off these beauties. The hero turns to her and says she is lucky, and Minerva does not understand what he means. He looks at her and says he wishes he were like her, with no thoughts in his head. She trembles with anger and asks the hero where he is going first, since he said he was heading straight to Sigmar. He replies that he needs to stop somewhere first. Manhwa asks him where that place is, and Sig replies that he will buy a sword first. But she drags him away, prompting him to ask what she wants. Furious, she yells that he is stupid for not realizing what she island. At the equipment store, the salesman welcomes them, saying that this is the best branch in Ebelim, and asks them how he can help them. Sig says he wants to buy a sword, a high-quality sword. The salesman is interested because they don't look like they can afford a famous sword. He suggests they take a tour of the store first, as the equipment is also excellent. The hero tells him that he will indeed look around because he will have to decide whether to buy or not. The salesman begins to guide them around the store, but remains suspicious of the hero. Manhwa finds this man very strange because, to her, it doesn't matter how good human swords are. Sig watches her jealously and puts his hand on her head, saying that she is still the best, which makes her feel very embarrassed. They continue walking until the salesman says they have reached the luxury section. They enter the room and notice that there are several amazing swords. The salesman puts on his gloves and says that if the sword they are looking for is for hunting non-standard monsters, then this sword would be perfect, showing them a red sword called the Red Dragon. He explains that if they choose this sword, they will be choosing the weapon of the legendary hero Arenos Gunfeld, who single-handedly killed dozens of dragons. The red color of the sword's blade was made from the spine of a red dragon, and its elegant curve is one of its features. Upon hearing the explanation about the sword, the hero notices that the vendor is trembling all over because of the sword. However, he decides to ask about the price of that sword. The vendor asks him to take into consideration that this is indeed the largest weapon shop on the continent, and then sets the price of the sword, stunning the hero with the amount. He immediately asks to see the next sword. The seller starts laughing, expecting such a reaction, but says okay, and shows him another sword. As they continue walking, the seller shows more swords and their prices, leaving the hero speechless and asking to see the next sword. While they are still wandering around the store, something catches the hero's attention, and he asks what island. The salesman explains that the sword is a new item that was recently received. It is a sword discovered by Sir Carl, one of the 5 warriors, and has not yet been displayed. Its name and price have not been determined, but he notices that the hero immediately heads toward the sword and asks him not to touch the merchandise. Immediately, the hero's expression changes, frightening the salesman. He reaches out to grab the sword, and when he touches it, a frozen energy begins to emanate from it. He smiles, saying that he will definitely buy that sword. After purchasing it, they go to the slums and stay at an inn, which makes Manhwa angry because she did not want to sleep in that place. Seg tickles the sword, explaining that he spent all his money to buy it, and if she doesn't like it, she can sleep outside where the tiger also sleeps well. Surprised, she shouts, asking if it wasn't enough that he betrayed her. Now, he wants to get her out of that neglected place too. The hero jumps on the bed with his sword, demanding that she be quiet and go to sleep, which makes her angry, and she yells that he is an unfaithful warrior. The night goes on, and everyone is almost asleep, but the hero hears a noise and starts to get up. He heads for the door and climbs the stairs until he reaches a window where he is surprised to see a girl with white hair looking at the moon. He calls out to her, saying he is confused because he doesn't know what is happening anymore, but asks her not to cry because that won't solve her problems. She turns her face away, asking if Sig is going to die. He feels confused as she explains that everyone they were with has died. Even the kind and brave ones have perished before her eyes. As he looks at her, he imagines that she might just be, but she interrupts him, saying that she is Sui, the cursed sword bound to her. Sui is the sword of sorrow that controls ice and cold, amplifying the user's grief and driving them to suicide. The dew that collects on the blade of the sword resembles tears. The hero tries to understand what is happening, saying that the sword he bought in Niflheim is the one. He asks if everyone who carries it ends up committing suicide. She cries and answers yes. He sighs deeply, thinking that all of this is terrible. She cries out, terrified, that she has decided not to be used again, but she was driven by an unknown force. Seg asks her to calm down and puts his hand on her head, saying that he is not sure how to use her, but he promises her one thing. Looking at her, he says that he will not die because of her. She immediately begins to remember someone who once told her that one day she would meet someone she wanted to spend the rest of her life with. She looks intently at the hero, seeing in him the person who said that to her. Then, Sig calls out to Sue, asking if she can call him by his name. He introduces himself as Mr. Sig. This fills her heart with joy. However, Manhwa arrives, saying that the room has suddenly become cold, and she wants to know what is going on. Smiling, Sui says that it seems there is someone here she has never met before. Sui introduces herself, asking what Manhwa was doing, standing next to her, staring at her. Manhwa says she heard everything from the room and asks if Sui is really a demon sword because she will show the price of trying to steal someone's servant, saying this with a truly evil expression. Quickly, Seg puts his hand on Minerva's head, asking her to calm down. She starts screaming, saying that it's also a problem because he had one sword and now he has another. Seg asks her to calm down and listen because she is the older sister, so she has to act respectfully. She starts thinking about being the older sister. Minerva turns to Sui and hears her asking to be taken care of, which makes her very happy with her role as the older sister, asking to be called that more often. Some time passes and Sue gets tired of being called the older sister so much. Sig asks if they are done and if they can leave. Sui replies that they are done and transforms back into a sword, leaving Manhwa surprised. As soon as Sui materializes as a sword, the hero immediately grabs her, changing his expression and saying that he is going to buy a sword. He returns to the best Elim weapon branch and breaks down the door to enter. Immediately, the salesman feels intimidated and asks what is going on. Sage demands that he call the owner. After realizing the situation, the salesman replies that the hero does not know where he is and asks the big man to teach him some manners. The big man bows, placing his hand on the hero's head, and asks him to leave, saying that he is being polite. However, not in the mood for talking. He delivers a direct blow to his face, causing him to fall quickly. With an evil look, he says that the big man does not seem to understand human language because he is asking for the store owner, not the security guard. As he says this, he begins to walk toward the salesman, placing his sword on his neck and asking him if he will call the owner now. The salesman, frightened, starts screaming, asking Sig if he thinks he will get out of there unharmed. At that moment, someone shouts at them to stop, causing them to turn their heads. It was the vendor's father, accompanied by two soldiers, asking what was going on. The vendor tries to downplay the situation, saying it's nothing, but his father interrupts him, telling him to be quiet. He looks at the protagonist, asking if he is the problem here. He asks Sig if he happens to be the owner of the shop. The man answers yes, but first asks if Sig can give a reason for causing all this trouble because he will have to pay the price if the answer is not satisfactory. Sig draws his sword, saying that the reason is simple, introducing himself as the guardian of death. With an evil look, he sticks the sword into the ground, freezing everything around him, and says that the reason should be enough if sold the best Effelheim, the best weapon shop in the world, a demonic sword to a fighter. He continues to explain that the place would have turned into a disaster zone if he couldn't handle the demonic sword, and asks what would have happened to Best Ethlehem for selling the demonic sword. This worries the owner, while his son shouts that he is lying because the warrior Carl said it was not a demonic sword. Sig pulls his sword from the ground, saying he doesn't want any trouble, but wants compensation in return. He moves toward the owner's son, who yells at his father to get away. The hero prepares to strike with an evil look, saying he will take an arm with him. He attacks. The owner's son, closing his eyes, waits for the blow, but then opens them and realizes that his father has jumped in front of the attack. But the hero has stopped the blow. As the father screams, saying that it's all his fault for not raising his son properly, he asks Sig to take his arm as compensation. Sig looks at them and thinks everything is a mess, but recognizing the father's love, he asks if that can be compensation, then takes a sword and leaves. On his knees, the owner's son breathes a sigh of relief, telling his father that he just wanted to be useful. His father listens silently. As he turns to leave, he says his son is useless, leaving him to brood over what he has just done. The son is angry at the hero for putting him through such a terrible humiliation. Far away, someone calls out to the hero. It's Sue, asking if he really plans to take these people's arms. Sage replies that he's not crazy. What would he do with someone's arm? She points to the sword, asking if his plan was to get that sword all along. He explains that it was 2 for the price of 1 because he was also teaching an unpleasant character a lesson. Zoe asks why he went to such lengths. With a mysterious look, he says it's his motto in life: return kindness with weakness and grudges with tenfold. The sword he took was the Red Dragon, a legendary sword that killed many dragons. The sword was in the possession of the dragon slayer Eranos Greenfield. Some time passed, and they headed to the Rose Cathedral. Minerva noticed the hero and commented that he was always frowning. This angered her because he was immersed in his own world with his new sword. As she asked him to stop, warning that if someone saw him, they might think he had found his soulmate, he simply replied that it was just an ordinary sword, unlike someone else. This statement made her even angrier. Zoe remained silent, listening to the entire conversation, but finally decided to call out to the hero, who turned around and asked what she wanted. Zoe complained that he was cruel for paying attention to that child and ignoring her. He tried to explain, saying that he had secured another sword, but she quickly shouted, warning him not to justify his actions and that he was paying more attention to her, even caressing her passionately. This left him completely silent as everyone heard it, creating a tense atmosphere. He responded angrily that he would blame her if she didn't stop her childish behavior. Jacker put his hand on Sue's head, saying that he was fine, that he was the one to blame, and asked her to forgive him. She, pretending, said she would forgive him this time, but someone called out to him, causing the 3 of them to turn around immediately. It was a bald man who said he was pleased to meet them. He introduced himself as Mark Blountier and said they would be working together on this business mission. He added that it was an honor to work with a deaf warrior. Jacker shook his hand, saying it was no big deal. He commented that their group was very strange. He approached the girls, saying they would be traveling together to Amelia, but Minerva tells him not to start a conversation with her because he is just a normal human. She says this, but then notices something. She looks at Mark Blountier and realizes that his bald head is shining, which impresses her. After talking, they begin their business mission. Zoe finds the trip very boring and asks if the human world is not very peaceful. The hero simply replies that it is not, as the difference is evident in how humans and demons fight. However, she points forward and sees Minerva playing with the bald man, adding hair to his head, which makes Jacker angry, ordering her to sit next to him immediately. But she doesn't like it and asks the bald man to protect her. Thus, a new argument begins inside the carriage, leaving everyone outside feeling anxious. Some time passes, and they decide to take a break, immediately lighting the campfire. The hero apologizes to Mark Blountier if they are bothering him, but he replies that he is fine because he is used to it. He starts laughing awkwardly because he no longer knows what to explain. The bald man says it's better this way and points to the crazy group, saying he'll figure out how things work later. But then he quickly asks to change the subject, wondering if it wasn't fate that brought them together this way. He takes out a bottle of carbon. Smiling, he asks if the hero would like a drink. Jacker, looking at the bottle, comments that it is a honey liqueur sold only in the Holy Kingdom of Carbon. Mark Blount shares a rumor, saying that as long as a person has that drink, they will survive even if they are captured by a dragon. The hero begins to laugh as the bald man hands him a cup, determined to drink. He takes the cup and hesitates, unsure of what to do at that moment. Mark Blountier says that everything is ready. They have alcohol, the camp is ready, and all that remains is for the hero to begin telling his stories. He becomes pensive about his stories, but after thinking for a moment, he says he has one to tell. He says he lost his father and began his journey as a warrior at the age of 15. He mentions that there were people who took him in without asking questions, but he later discovered that they were hunting dogs, who picked up and sold the offspring of warriors to the Duke of Barthelon. Mark Blountier asks how he survived such a situation. Before he can explain, Minerva calls him over, asking him what kind of exciting conversation he was having that made him ignore them. She points to the hero's cup, asking him what is in it because it smells sweet and pleasant. He asks her if she wants to try it, but she mishears him and starts to speak ill of it. However, she quickly realizes her mistake and smiles, asking him if he is serious. He tells her to take it quickly or he might change his mind. Happily, she takes the cup. She starts drinking, while Mark yells that she shouldn't drink because it's an adult drink. Jack continues his story, asking the bald man if he asked how he survived at that time. He says that luckily, the mercenary saved him that day, and he learned something from the mercenary at that time. Manhwa laughs to herself as the hero explains that he learned first to repay kindness twice and desire revenge 10 times, and second that people who approach you with a smile. He says this and notices Manhwa's cup falling to the ground. For her part, she begins to break down, asking what happened to her body. Jacker catches her in his arms, glaring angrily at the bald man, while Minerva continues to scream that the hero has deceived her again. With an evil look, he continues his thoughts about people who come smiling, saying that he has learned never to trust them, and asks Mark if he agrees with him. Saying this, Mark Blantier quickly draws his sword and strikes the hero, who defends himself, causing Minerva to feel terrified. With a macabre smile, Mark asks when the hero realized this. The hero begins to laugh, asking if this is really a question, striking a blow that sends Mark flying through the air. He puts Minerva on the ground while the bald man yells at everyone to pounce on the hero, and they immediately attack him. Jacker, with a terrified look, turns around and says he realized it from the beginning. The meteor strike hits the ground, causing a huge explosion in the area and destroying a good part of the ground. The dust begins to settle. The hero pushes his sword into the ground, holding it for support, as the attack came so suddenly. Imagining that the attack was brutal but clumsy and that his vision is not good, he barely has time to think before he notices 2 more attacks coming towards him, so he jumps immediately to avoid being hit. But he notices another attack coming towards him, which hits him, knocking him away and causing an explosion at the sight. Mark Blantier smiles, saying that it's a good thing he was suspicious of them from the start, and that if that's all the power he has, he's really disappointed in the Warrior of Doom. Immediately, the hero begins to gather energy in his sword, activating his Tiger Vision ability. The warrior rushes towards the hero, not wanting to give him a chance to do anything, shouting at him to get ready. Jackar defends his attack and uses another ability, the Flying Serpent of the Greedy Frog, causing energy to surround the soldier, who doesn't understand what is happening. But it was too late. The power engulfs his entire body. The hero wastes no time and rushes towards the others, clutching his sword tightly, which emits a snake-like aura, easily cutting down that soldier and heading for another. From a distance, Mark Blantier watches the hero, saying that he is not just a warrior in name, which makes him explode with rage and declare that he will pay for that trick as power flows from him. As the hero fights the soldier, he feels the intense energy coming from Mark Blantier. With a sharp glance, he uses his ability to destroy the tiger's vision, striking the ground, which begins to spread and destroy everything in its path. At that moment, the hero calmly walks forward using his explosive step, which propels him directly toward Mark's destructive force. He takes his place and extends his hand to stop that huge wave of destructive energy, which explodes rapidly and destroys everything around it, while Mark watches from afar. He begins to breathe deeply, expecting to see the hero dead. However, Sig suddenly appears and rushes towards him with his explosive steps. Mark shouts in surprise, saying he is crazy to use his arm as a shield. The hero continues his attack, charging energy into his sword, and strikes Mark several times, knocking him away. His sword is also cut into several pieces. He throws one of the pieces away, and it falls and sticks into the ground. Seg, with his sword pointed at Mark's neck, says it's over. Mark starts screaming, begging to be spared, saying that he was hired by Kevin Argaram, one of the best in Even. However, the hero replies that he knew this because as soon as they left Ebelm, an assassin was hired immediately, and there was only one person with enough recent hatred to do so. With an evil look, he says they should have hidden their presence from the beginning. He says this, and ends Mark Blantier's life. After the fight, Susie comes running, calling out to the hero. Exhausted, he says it's over, but she asks anxiously why he didn't use it and why he didn't trust her. He remains silent for a few moments, then looks at her and says it's because of what she herself said, that she didn't want anyone to get hurt for her sake. He asks her not to worry. He says this and begins to feel dizzy, falling to the ground from the battle, leaving Zoe worried. Some time passes, and Sig lies down. He suddenly wakes up and sits up quickly, noticing that someone has taken care of him and treated his wounds. Next to the bed, someone places a cup on the table, saying that he is still moving his body recklessly. Sig begins to think about the person in front of him. This person is the second prince of Pamelia, who says that it has been a long time since he saw the Warrior of Death. 5 years ago, in the capital city of Notmian, someone bangs on the table, saying that Duke Parvanum has been assassinated. This person is the first prince of Amelia, Tadris Amelia. Angrily, he rises from his chair, demanding that the killer be found and Seg be punished. But the second prince interrupts him, saying that Sig is not a murderer but a hero because Arsamarinen has committed many tyrannical and criminal acts over the years, which surprises his brother. He explains further that the hero inherited the warrior's blood and made the evil man pay for his sins, and everyone should praise him for his merits at the appropriate time. The blonde-haired young man in white clothes is surprised to hear this and shouts that he cannot speak that way because Duke Parvin is one of the greatest nobles in Amelia, and how can they kill him like that? Base smiles and says that they know nothing, looks at everyone present, and changes his expression, saying that they should think about who will stand with the people who are dissatisfied with Parvan's evil deeds. He asks his brother if he doesn't think this way, which makes him angry, asking how a boy with a face like an ass could understand the essence of the matter. Basie interlaces his fingers, too, thinking about what title to give Sig. He thinks for a moment and decides to call him the Death Warrior. In the present, the hero asks why he is there and where they are. Smiling, Pace replies that he has something to discuss with him and that they are on the outskirts of Amelia. He asks if those answers are satisfactory. Pace snaps his fingers and suddenly opens the door, letting his group in, explaining that he found Sig, provided medical assistance, and brought the ladies who were with him, emphasizing that they are very strong and that the hero obviously took good care of them. Sig replies that it is all because someone forced him to take on the title of one of the 5 great heroes, and since there was no end to the fools who wanted to challenge him, he had to live in the countryside, because that life was more suitable for him. At that moment, someone arrives who catches the hero's attention. This person is Roses, who asks him to address the prince with more respect. Minerva defends the hero, telling Roses that he must be a role model. Roses turns toward her with a serious look, holding his sword. However, Baze asks him to stop. He then asks the hero if he has a motto that says kindness is repaid 2-fold and aggression 10-fold. This makes him serious, but the young prince starts laughing, saying that the hero owes him from that moment on, asking Sig to carry out his mission, which surprises him with this request. Baze begins to explain that there has been a recent attack on the allies. Sig asks if that doesn't happen from time to time. Baze replies, yes, but if it were that simple, he wouldn't have come to him because there was something strange about it. The deaths were happening to people connected to his brother. Sig, interested in the mission, asks if he wants him to catch the criminals. Baze smiles and says it doesn't matter how he does it because the people who run the country are afraid of him. After all, a powerful corrupt individual was punished by the destroyer. This means that he is not just a warrior from that country, but a symbol. Thanks to this, once he calls him an ally, he can attract many people to his side. In other words, it's either join the cause or be judged. Baze makes it clear that it would be great if he could solve the murder case at the same time and gives the hero a deadline of 1 month to solve it. He says this and leaves, telling him to head to Nemen to complete his mission. Sage takes a deep breath, thinking that he seems to have some problems to solve. Minerva steps forward and asks him if everything is over. He replies that it is not yet, but he does not want to know. She threatens to attack him with all the cats there. He immediately shouts, asking her to wait because no one has been hurt. She hits him on the head, making him look at her as she says it doesn't matter because as a servant, he must not hurt himself without permission. He becomes thoughtful about what Minerva just said, wondering if she is really angry. However, they soon start arguing until Zoe catches the hero's attention, making him turn around immediately. She begins to say that she agrees with Minerva because she doesn't want anyone to get hurt or die because of her. She takes a deep breath and begins to cry, saying that under no circumstances does she want them to get hurt. She looks at the hero and asks him to promise her that if something like this happens again, he will use it without hesitation. He smiles and says that's fine and that he will use it next time. Elsewhere inside the vehicle, Baze is lost in thought about the meeting he attended earlier until Roses calls out to him, saying that he respects the choice he made. But, isn't that a little weak for one of the 5 great heroes? Because the hero of destruction was a political decision. He sends a message saying that even though he killed one of the greatest men in the country, he is still alive, and that perhaps he did not use it for power. However, he becomes concerned when he reads the message, which was written asking Duke Parvin to contact him because he would lose his life that day. He goes on to say that from the beginning, he had used the hero for revenge and looks at Roses, asking him if he would be able to risk his life and achieve his goal as he did. He then expresses his expectations for the coming month. After some time, everyone arrives in Nemini. Manhwa is amazed by the huge wall, impressed by how people have reached such an incredible level of development. Seg explains that the city has never fallen, even during attacks by dragons or monsters. In fact, it was a unique city with no ruins or complex books. Seg turns his face away and asks them to stop gawking like villagers and move quickly. The girls notice the crowd, and he begins to worry, pointing out that there are so many people that they could easily get lost. Minerva takes a deep breath, agreeing with him, pointing out that something like this has happened before. Then suddenly, she taps her fingers, suggesting that it might be better to get rid of half of them. Quickly, the hero puts his hand on her head and on the cats, making his face horrified, asking them to please calm down. The girl hears a vendor calling out about shoes for runners and asks the hero to buy them, but he immediately refuses. She also hears a miracle herb vendor asking the hero to buy some because he needs it for his final battle. He simply replies that he doesn't want any of it. She is immediately upset. Sig notices that she is angry again, but he remembers Sui. She is standing, looking at some hairpins. He approaches her and asks if she likes anything. She is looking at a hairpin shaped like a white flower. The hero asks the price, and the salesman replies that it is beautiful and would look great on his sister too, offering a good discount. Sig buys the item and gives it to her, and she quickly thanks him, delighted with the gift. Minerva throws it at her, asking if he is giving it to her. He says that if she wants, she can get rid of it. She feels embarrassed and says she doesn't like it, but she will keep it anyway. She puts it on her hair immediately, saying that one day it might save her life. Sig imagines that Nodomian is a treasure trove of history where nothing is lost, and perhaps there they can find a way to break the contract with the demon swords. He watches Minerva run and hug Sui, commenting that they really look like sisters. But he wonders to himself if there is a way. Will he really be able to get rid of them? Later, at Bass's house, he is happy to see them again. Minerva replies that humans do not interest her. While Sui simply greets him, Seg approaches, saying he is here, and asking what he should do. Boss replies that there is nothing specific, only that he must take on the role of royal investigator. The hero explains that he does not have much knowledge in this field, but Boss knows that he will only use his name. He wants to start the operation right away, but something is missing, which worries the hero. Bass replies that they need to add a little excitement to the fear in everyone's hearts in Amelia with the Death Warrior. He laughs, expressing that he likes Minerva's good taste and asks the hero to transform into the Death Warrior immediately, making him feel uncomfortable with the request. After finishing all the details of the mission elsewhere in Nemian, the hall was crowded with many important figures. Someone asks Todriz if Bass is still there. He replies that, yes, Bass may be a little stubborn, but he always respects good manners. He explains that he does not accept the humiliation of his brother, even in his absence. This person is the king of Amelia, Winston. He looks at Todriz and says that he is the one who destroyed all the foundations that had been established. Looking closely at his son, he notices his temperament and imagines that the eldest son's pride exceeds his abilities. The youngest son thinks only of fun, and the daughter has run away from the palace, claiming that it is boring. However, even if the world is in his hands, there is no one to inherit it. At that moment, the servant announces the arrival of the second prince of the kingdom of Amelia. Quite frankly, Boz, Todriz quickly shouts, asking how he dares to come after his father. Boz feels embarrassed, explaining that he was late because he brought an important guest, which arouses his father's curiosity about who it could be. Bass asks permission to introduce him, which makes Todriz angry. As the person begins to walk towards them, people are both afraid and curious, wondering who this person could be. Bass continues to introduce him, saying that as they know from the past, the evil and cruel Duke Perfinan was killed by Sig himself, the Warrior of Death. Immediately, Todriz shouts to the soldiers, ordering them to quickly capture this noble assassin. People stare at him, but he tells them to back off as he has legally eliminated Perfinan. He says this, and quickly draws his sword. Sui uses her freezing power and asserts that there is nothing shameful about doing the right thing. This leaves everyone there in suspense. Without wasting any time, he rushes towards one of the guards, grabs him by the neck, causing him to tremble, and introduces himself as Sig, greeting Amelia's son and King Winston. This puts Winston at ease. While leaving Todd confused, Winston begins to laugh, but quickly changes his expression, saying that it seems it was no coincidence that the young man defeated Parvinen single-handedly, ordering the soldiers to retreat immediately. Rumors spread among many people. The king points out that Sig took the life of a corrupt nobleman, damaging the country's reputation. But his will is no different from his own, making Todriz angry, while Pia smiles smugly. Duke Parfinan, who supported the first prince, had authority similar to that of the king. But one fact must not be forgotten. From the beginning, the summit of that country was one and the same. Nevertheless, the king orders an immediate return to the banquet. The new Tian party was held every 2 months. Everyone appeared to be smiling on the outside, but what the hero saw with his own eyes was a silent battlefield of nobles, vying for power. At that moment, someone approached him and placed a hand on his shoulder. It was Boz. He congratulated him, saying that his appearance in social circles seemed to have been a success. Sig takes a deep breath, saying he's not sure if that's the case, and then asks what that treatment was. Bass explains that it was because of the rumors about him, the kind that condemn corrupt aristocrats or scare crying children. The hero feels resentful, because he can clearly tell that it was Bass himself who spread the false rumor. Bass explains that all this means that his achievements were impressive, as that area had been quiet for many years. But he emphasizes that in any case, from that moment on, it will only be the beginning. He bids farewell to Bass and asks him to appear more impressive. Sig begins to think that no one there cares who dies. He ponders this and hears someone calling him. When he turns around quickly, he startles a child who begins to cry from fear. He sees the frightened child and tells her not to worry because he will not hurt her. She is happy to hear this and turns to tell the others that everything is fine. Quickly, a group of children surround him, cheering that they are happy to be in the presence of the Warrior of Death. Another child asks if he can turn into a bat at night. Minerva notices from afar and asks if her servant is not wonderful. They all run towards her, asking if he really is her servant. She replies that he is, which makes the children happy. Sig approaches Minerva, ready to strike her, but she senses what is about to happen and runs away, telling the children to follow her. He feels angry because the children clearly don't understand the situation. He says this and starts walking outside the castle. He looks up at the stars, taking a deep breath as it was really hard to deal with everything. A woman appears, asking if fighting monsters would be easier. She was Princess Laurel Amelia from the Kingdom of Amelia. Sig immediately welcomes her, introducing himself. She approaches and laughs, telling him not to be so formal, calling him a warrior of death. He remains still as she moves a little closer, saying that she just came out because she was feeling frustrated. She comments that the moon is rising beautifully and asks why people get involved in such boring things. Sig doesn't quite understand what she's talking about, so he asks her what she's trying to say. She quickly approaches him, puts her hand on his chest, saying that he knows, and hugs him, asking him if he can condemn her that night. She feels embarrassed and also asks him if it wouldn't be fun for him if things went that way. He takes a deep breath, saying that he promotes that she has a reputation for sleeping with every man in New Tian, earning her the bad nickname Tango Amelia. And when he looks at her, he says that her gaze is too cold to be seductive. She continues to try to convince him, saying that he makes her feel warm. He asks Sig if she is also seeking power. She replies that she is here just like everyone else gathered. He looks at her and imagines that she does not like this place at all. She calls him the warrior of death and asks him how a woman like her, with no power or foundation, could inherit a place like this. He starts to walk away, saying that if she doesn't like things, leaving would be a great option, or she could fight to the end. He turns back, asking if that's not a good idea. Lauralee smiles, saying it would be nice if that were possible, and thanks him for the pleasant conversation, saying she looks forward to talking next time. Then she leaves, leaving the hero alone, who remains thinking, imagining that she is really Tango Amelia. Meanwhile, elsewhere, someone is screaming. It is Minerva, asking the hero to stop hitting her on the head. He is angry because he asked her not to go out. Zoe says in a trembling voice that the hero was cheating on her with another woman. He is confused, asking why she is doing this while lecturing the sisters. He hears someone say that they are leaving. It is Prince Boss. He asks if, by any chance, he knows Albert Frederick. Curious, he replies that he knows the Iron Knight Albert Frederick, saying that no swordsman could be ignorant of one of the 5 great warriors. If the title given to warriors who achieve greatness at a young age is 5 great warriors, it literally refers to the knights who represent the absolute power of the continent. Bass begins to sweat, saying that Frederick wants to challenge him to a duel, leaving the hero surprised to hear this. He asks everyone to flee immediately, causing Bass to stop and shout that he is about to die. So why wait? The prince explains further, saying that although it is a duel, it seems that Frederick has something else he wants to ask him separately. When he looks at the hero, who is sweating with anxiety, he asks him if he knows the man known as Sinkich Frederick, leaving him shocked to hear this name. After hearing the name that left him in shock, Minerva asks if they should run away now. Jagger recalls the previous events. A group of warriors were sitting around a fire, one of them saying that he hates scoundrels and can't stand those who shout loudly. Another asserts that they are just weaklings who waste food. The blonde girl explains that she hates scoundrels, especially if they are from a good warrior family, wondering if she is right as she looks at Jagger. She also explains that the hero's family has a short lifespan and therefore deserves a good price. Someone approaches the hero, saying that it's good if his body is worth something, thanking him for being born. Jagger tries to say something, but his mouth is gagged. The soldier raises his hand toward the hero, asking if he is trying to say something, but is quickly surprised when Jagger suddenly stands up, smashing his head with his head, causing blood to spray everywhere. He then runs away, and the soldier continues to scream in pain after the blow to the head. However, another warrior quickly appears, sweeping Jagger's legs. He falls to the ground, confirming that the hero is of warrior descent, reminding his friend not to forget that because he captured the hero, pretending to be a monster due to his ferocity. He makes it clear that he warned everyone there not to relax because he never knows what the hero might do. At that moment, Jagger shouts that he will kill everyone there, causing the soldier to turn around. He notices the malicious look in the hero's eyes, as he shouts again that he will kill them all one day. But he quickly receives a blow to the stomach from the soldier, who asks the hero if he is the one who will try something like that, explaining that just because he has been treated well, he acts all arrogant. He asks him what the weak boy can do other than stare. He says this as he stomps hard on the hero's head and asks him again what he can do. However, someone says that he can do anything better than everyone else there, leaving the soldier afraid. He looks up, notices the source of the voice, and sees the person coming towards him. Ready to attack, he immediately defends himself, hitting the person who arrived and wondering who this person island. Smiling, this person says that he was following the stray dogs in Parthenon, proudly introducing himself as Sigmund Broad. He walks towards them, saying that chasing them was hard work, indicating that he has a request next. He points his finger at the hero, asking them to hand him over. In return, he will not kill everyone here, asking if this is not a good offer. However, before he can finish his question, he notices something coming towards him. An axe sticks forcefully into a tree. Sigmund easily dodges it, saying that their work was their answer. Angrily, the soldier makes sure he doesn't relax because he was facing hunting dogs. Smiling, he is satisfied that his response has been confirmed and immediately rushes towards everyone. He stomps on the fire to obscure everyone's vision, making them afraid because it was pitch black. Quickly, the commander shouts, saying he can't see anything, and asks Grace to do something. She grabs her staff, but explains that she needs to recite the spell first, asking him to wait. Nervous about the situation, he starts cursing Sigmund, but he doesn't notice him, standing next to him. With a malicious look, ready to attack, he immediately cuts off his head. He quickly turns around because the blonde girl has just cast her spell. A bright light explodes and illuminates the place. However, they notice their friend's body on the ground, decapitated, and cry out for him. Sigmund, completely calm, explains that for a hunting dog, the man he killed was very weak. Upon hearing this, Benjamin becomes enraged, yelling at Grace to cover him because he will kill him at any cost. He heads towards Sigmund, who is watching him closely, leaving the fight between them until they cross swords. Sigmund explains that he can no longer relax, which angers Benjamin, and he asks him to stop talking nonsense. However, Sig spits the toothpick that was in his mouth directly into Benjamin's eye, causing blood to spray everywhere. He then tries to stab him, but Sigmund dodges it without any trouble, ready to strike back immediately. He delivers a powerful punch to his chin, breaking several teeth and throwing him away. Sig approaches Benjamin, saying he will end this once and for all, but quickly notices something. However, it is too late, as a huge explosion occurs where he was standing, where Grace cast a spell, taking advantage of his distraction. But she quickly notices a shadow amid the flames, wondering if he is dead. She moves toward the explosion and looks at a charred corpse. Segundi appears, saying that it was really dangerous, but that it was very good. Upon hearing this, Grace realizes that the charred body was Benjamin's. She is shocked and immediately runs away, leaving Sig confused. She rushes to the hero, grabs him, then takes a dagger and yells at Sig not to come near, or she will kill him, demanding that he drop his sword and kneel. He simply replies that it's okay, dropping the sword, but before it hits the ground, kicks it, sending it flying straight towards the blonde girl, hitting her on the head. Jagger watches the scene in horror, falling to the ground next to the blonde girl's body. Sig asks the hero if he is okay and if he has found a way to survive. He says this as the hero frees himself from the ropes, using Grace's dagger, and replies shortly after that he was at his worst. Sig points out that the leader of the hunting dogs was difficult to deal with. He puts his hand on the hero's head and introduces himself again, saying his name is Sigmund and that he is a mercenary. Jagger also introduces himself and thanks him for saving his life. Sig turns around with a smile, telling the hero that he can pay him double the fee later, which makes him angry that it is double. He picks up his sword, explaining that these are his mottos. Smiling, he says he repays kindness twice and holds grudges tenfold. The sword Sigmund carries is Shadow, a black sword that emits a dark aura. It is the latest in a series of white swords crafted by Master Felt Napieren. It was originally a set with the knight's armor. A year later, they were sitting around a campfire, roasting delicious meat skewers. Sig explains that he didn't expect things to turn out so well, asking the hero to call him a chef because he is so skilled at cooking. Jagger feels embarrassed and says he is not as great as Sig thinks. Watching the hero eat, he imagines that the sharpness Jagger once had has diminished a little, and now he looks like a normal child. Thinking this is a good sign, Jagger notices that Sig has taken out a lollipop and quickly asks if he has started eating sweets again, explaining that if he continues, his teeth will decay. Sig simply replies that he is trying to quit smoking and that it helps, asking the hero for his support. But Jagger insists that he must stop eating sweets, which upsets Sig, who tells the hero that he is very strange because he has never seen a child who does not like sweets. After that, some time passes and they go to a bar. Sig bangs his beer glass on the table, shouting that it was really good. Jagger looks at the food on the table and asks what it island. Sig simply replies, pizza. Sigmund picks up the newspaper on the table and asks the hero to relax because he is very nervous, but he is quickly shocked when he reads it. He throws the newspaper on the table and says that the Cadargo family has been destroyed. The Cadargo family is one of the warrior families. The hero explains that the Cadargo family was one of the warrior families, and it was the place where the case of a missing person was entrusted to Seg. It was the family that discovered the Barthunon conspiracy and was planning to report it to the kingdom. However, they say they were falsely accused and ruined. Immediately, Segund orders the hero to gather his belongings. Seg, who does not know what happened, asks why this is happening so suddenly with a serious frown. Sig explains that the men of Bartholon probably suspected something, and if they stayed where they were, they might die without anyone knowing. With that, they set off at full speed through the forest. Sig is frustrated by the situation and says he doesn't like it, but they have no choice but to return. Curious, Sig asks, "Back where?" Sig turns around with a smile and says they are returning to the safest place on the continent. But at that moment, an attack is launched against them, which Sig easily repels thanks to his extreme agility, saying that they have already been followed. He says this as he looks at the hunting dogs of Bartholon among the trees. Sig calls out to the hero, asking him not to panic and to stay close because he will clear the way. He draws his sword and attacks the first mercenary in front of him, who defends himself against Sig's attack. As their swords clash, Seg notices an attack coming towards him, but someone intercepts it. It was the hero, which makes Seg feel uneasy. However, he notices 4 other mercenaries jumping on them, stabbing their swords where they were, which only pierced Seg's cloak. With his incredible agility, he manages to grab the hero and quickly move away, leaving the mercenaries stunned by the maneuver. Smiling, Seg asks Sig to pay attention because he is about to teach him a lesson. Saying this, he pushes the hero aside as 2 mercenaries approach him. Confident, he waits until the last moment to make his move. He slides down the tree behind him, dodging the attacks, telling the hero that when facing a group, he must use the terrain to his advantage. He finishes them off shortly after, without mercy, then asks the others if they plan to fight. He places his sword on the ground, explaining that with their level of courage, they are really just hunting dogs. He says this, and moves quickly with his sword, kicking up dust, which obscures the mercenaries' vision. They yell back, calling Sig a coward, but Sig wastes no time, jumping on the mercenaries' back and saying that they are the cowards for attacking a child. He finishes him off shortly after. He pauses for a moment to think, but takes a deep breath and asks Bartholon's hunting dogs if that's all they have to offer. After the hero recalls all this, he decides to go meet Albert Freck, the Iron Knight of the 5 Kingdoms, who goes straight to the point and asks where the boy island. Sig remains silent for a moment, takes a deep breath, and says that the boy is dead. Immediately, Albert breaks something with his hand. He takes a deep breath, steps toward the hero, and explains that the boy's name was Sigmund Frederick, clarifying that he was his only son. Upon hearing this, Sig is shocked. He never imagined such a coincidence. Albert explains that Sig tried to return to the hero's family to gather strength and face Bartholon. He then asks Sig why Sig died. However, shocked by this information, Sig simply apologizes, angering the knight, who asks if the hero has any intention of answering. Sig turns his back, saying he will not speak, but will show the life Sig lived while he was with him. As Albert's expression changes, the hero explains that there are some conditions. With a stern look, Albert warns that he hopes there will be no negotiation regarding his son's life. After agreeing on the details, they head to an arena for a match where everyone is eager to see Albert freak. People comment that no matter what happens, no one can defeat Lord Albert. Some say they will bet the bar tab on Lord Albert's victory, claiming that the Death Warrior has no chance. Todris, always nervous, raises his voice at his brother and asks him why he is so relaxed. Boss smiles, saying simply that there is no reason to frown on such a beautiful day. Todris accuses his brother of being frivolous, but soon hears a voice advising him to be quiet. He turns around immediately to see that it is his father who has spoken and greets him right away. The father sits down, listening to something shortly thereafter. Trudis looks at the flower on the chair and says that Laurel will not be attending, and that it has been a long time since they all appeared together in public. Asking if he should call her, the king simply waves his hand, saying that there is no need, as something more important will happen today. He turns toward the center of the arena as the announcer shouts. He declares that Amelia is the pride of the country. He introduces the Iron Knight, Sir Albert Frederick, and then the person who has been most criticized for what he did to the Duke, the Death Warrior Seg. He asks the two to enter the arena and stand facing each other. Albert turns to the king, leaving him confused, then asks what is happening. Albert takes off his helmet, then kneels, introducing himself and saying he has a request. Winston asks him to continue. With his head bowed, Albert explains that it is shameful for him to fight a young man. To justify this unfair fight, he immediately asks for punishment. This request confuses the king, but Albert quickly explains that if the hero's sword reaches him, he will accept defeat and commit to doing any favor, asking the king to be a witness. Trudus, the fanatic, asks why he is talking such nonsense, but his father warns him, explaining that Sir Albert is saying and directing these words to him. Winston, looking at the knight, replies that it is fine. He will do as he asks. He immediately thanks Albert and then asks the hero if he is satisfied with this. Sig nods that he island. Albert quickly returns his helmet, demanding that the talking stop and the battle begin in earnest. He says this as he takes his fighting stance, demanding that the hero keep his word. Sig quickly draws his red dragon sword, takes a deep breath, and takes his other sword. He prepares for battle. He remembers that he had previously asked Sui to give him her power again. She gets excited, saying that she will do so as she will always be with him. He thanks her, making Minerva jealous that she is not being used. At that moment, he uses Sui's power to create an icy aura. With a confident look, he lunges toward Albert, striking a blow and creating an icy path toward the knight, who stands still, waiting for the attack. He defends himself with his shield and immediately attacks afterward. But the hero suddenly appears in front of him, ready to attack, striking with an evil look. However, Albert counterattacks, defending himself with ease. Sig remains confident, striking with his sword and then with his red dragon sword, creating a whirlwind of fire and ice, resembling a hellish tornado. But Albert defends himself with his shield, and noticing a gap in the hero, he advances enthusiastically with his shield, throwing Sig into the air, and immediately attacks afterwards. Sig becomes anxious because he is in the air, but he uses his ability to teleport, launching himself towards Albert and striking hard. Albert gets excited, saying that the battle is wonderful, defending himself from the hero's attack with his shield. But the hero did not expect this and is worried about what will come next. A powerful attack comes at him, hitting him and throwing him hard against the wall, destroying everything around him, leaving him unable to move due to the powerful attack. Albert starts laughing, asking if that's all the hero has to offer. The sword Albert Frederick carries is Allegra, Amelia's national treasure. It can only be wielded by the strongest knights. It is a long, radiant sword that emits a rainbow-colored aura, and was originally a national treasure of Amelia, presented by King Winston to Albert, the strongest knight in the empire. The crowd cheers wildly, declaring the Steel Knight the winner. However, the hero begins to cough and moan in pain until a shadow appears, describing him as miserable. Minerva says it's not too late and asks him to use her. She extends her hand, explaining that if he wants, she will face the world for him. Sig remains silent, then stands up, saying that he was just checking things out and that it will be serious from now on. Angry, Minerva starts yelling at him, but he changes his expression and becomes serious. She becomes sad, saying that he is mean because she wanted to help him too. Sig returns to the center of the arena. Albert asks the hero if he wants to surrender. He spits blood on the ground and calls out to Sue as she materializes into a sword. He explains to Albert that he hasn't done so yet, but he will offer him his son's entire life. Confident, he grips tightly, declaring, "It's all or nothing." He stabs the sword into the ground with a terrifying look, using his ability, Ice Crystal Mist, creating a vortex of ice. Albert raises his shield to eye level, thinking the hero is using it to obstruct his vision, but he quickly notices some movement. Two ice shards head toward him, but Albert quickly cuts them down with his attack. However, he sees an attack coming toward him in the reflection of the ice crystal, and Shuriken blocks the fire at the last moment with his shield. This attack catches his attention. He realizes it was the red dragon's sword. Albert begins to recognize the hero's attack pattern. First, he tried to block his vision. Then, he kept him busy with ice pillars to distract him. Finally, his last attack tried to surprise him, too. Believing the hero's adaptive tactics to be clever, he immediately slams his shield into the ground with all his might as the hero lunges toward him. This leaves Sig stunned by what is coming toward him. A destructive force spreads out, destroying everything in its path. Albert stands his ground, laughing. Meanwhile, Sig spits a lot of blood on the ground. Looking at the injured hero, Albert imagines that his fighting style involves overcoming insufficient mana levels with his sword. Albert begins to walk toward him, asking if he is running out of mana and if he wants to surrender while he still can. Breathing heavily, Sig replies, "Not yet, as he has not shown what he wants." He says this, preparing to go all out again. He immediately uses the Cheetah Vision ability, followed by the Explosive Step ability, destroying the ground beneath his feet. He rushes at the speed of sound toward Albert, who is preparing to use his ability again. He then strikes immediately, heading toward the hero, hitting him and scattering blood everywhere. However, Albert is shocked by what he sees. The hero has grabbed his sword with his hand, causing more blood to flow. Seg doesn't waste any time, taking advantage of Albert's surprise, and launches an attack aimed at his head, hitting the helmet and knocking it off. Albert stands still, staring at the hero's sword. However, the hero releases him. Albert wonders why he let him go, but quickly changes his mind, realizing that he needs to adjust his position. He thinks about this, but fails to notice the sword stuck in the ground. which creates a frozen aura that quickly begins to freeze his body like an ice coffin, making him anxious. Considering that all of the hero's attacks were aimed at getting close to him and freezing him, Sig jumps up, still holding Albert's sword, and declares that now is the time when everything will be revealed. Surprised, Albert begins to realize that the hero's movements are something his son used to do in the past. Looking closely at the hero, he begins to see his son in him, believing that Sigmund was a smart child like the hero. However, Sig delivers a powerful headbutt to Albert's face. He then follows it up with a roundhouse kick, jumping backwards, spinning in the air, but landing in the middle of the arena after spinning too much. The spectators fall silent for a moment, but then go wild with the outcome of the fight. Albert, lying on the ground, starts laughing. King Winston immediately begins to applaud, saying that they have won, but at the same time, they have lost. He says this, looking at Albert, who simply nods. Someone rushes in, running frantically, informing the king that there is a problem as another murder has taken place. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Sig Saxon calls out and introduces himself. He turns around, noticing that the hero has arrived, and asks him to come in. As they walk through the palace, they stop. Sig says, intrigued, that it was quite obvious. Looking at the murdered body, he approaches it and examines it, then mentions that the weapon used in the crime was a long sword, explaining that this was not a clear murder because the body was clean. Upon further observation, he explains that there were no signs of resistance, only the sword wound, and that all the events so far are the same. Seg begins to imagine that even when the criminal attacked him without reaction, the difference in skill was so great that the victim could not even defend himself. The hero explains to Saxon that it is almost certain that the perpetrator is someone familiar, which intrigues him with what he has just heard. Sig says that it would be very easy to take down the aristocrats without leaving traces in their office, because there may be cases where the killer is superior. However, the chance is slim. Saxon quickly agrees with the hero. Sig turns around and asks if he suspects anyone. Saxon says that at first, he suspected Todris. However, Todris also had a victim at the same time. Even the weapon and evidence matched, but they say there was an inscription on it that read, "To bring down the warrior of doom." Sig turns around and asks if they are trying to frame him, but Saxon replies that they are simply trying to capitalize on rumors, saying that the warrior of destiny is terrorizing the nobles once again. Suspecting who might be behind this, the hero asks who is spreading this false rumor. Saxon asks Sig who he thinks it is, then quickly answers, "It's PS." He then asks to change the subject, pointing out that there is currently a group among the noble forces that has not yet been attacked. He explains that these are the rebels who have cut off their support for the hero. Some time passes and they head elsewhere. Saxon knocks on the door and calls out to Lord Kaimalestro. He opens it cautiously, asking what the problem is, and notices that the hero comments that his battle with Albert was wonderful, which pleases the hero. Saxon wants to get to the heart of the matter, asking for the greetings to end. He quickly asks them to follow him. The two sit down, and Jamie asks what they want to discuss. Saxon explains that 2 aristocrats were killed last night. However, both were close to Boss and Todris. Not understanding much, he asks what this has to do with him. Saxon says he is sure Jamie did not know, but while everyone else was dying, he was the only one who survived because the rebels, like him, withdrew and betrayed their support. Upon hearing this, Jamie becomes angry and immediately asks if this means he is now a suspect. Saxon simply replies, yes. Jamie's anger grows, and he grabs his sword, shouting that the dead fool was killed simply because Boss had changed, meaning he was no longer the person he used to be. Saxon quickly draws his sword and tells him to shut up because that is not a name a traitor should utter. The two point their swords at each other's faces and immediately attack each other. Sig suddenly appears between them, watching this stupid fight, stops the attack, and asks them to stop. He then asks Ha if he really didn't mean to kill him, leaving both of them stunned by the question. Looking at the hero, Ni becomes intrigued because even he was a suspect. However, he thinks for a moment and asks the hero if he was ultimately just a puppet for Bass. After this conclusion, Sig returns to the hotel where he is staying, relieved to be back. Upon entering, his group welcomes him warmly, and he feels happy that they were all waiting for him. Zoe tries to hide her excitement, saying that she sensed his arrival and decided to come out to greet him. Seg, looking at Manhwa, asks what her problem is as she shows it to him, but she quickly replies that her sister was upset because she couldn't help him in the battle against the knight. Manhwa immediately feels embarrassed, saying that one must be worthy to use her, otherwise they should not approach her. Sig tries to provoke her, asking if she is really angry. She responds angrily, no, so forget it. Smiling, he asks the hero if they want to go on an outing after all this time, which makes them excited and they ask if he is serious. He answers yes, inviting them to go out immediately. However, Manhwa becomes suspicious of the hero for suddenly wanting to go out. After leaving, they begin walking through the slums, passing through alleys. They stop in front of an underground entrance, and Manhwa asks why he always takes them to illogical places. He explains that here you can see the true face of the city, asking them to follow him. Upon entering the underground, Minerva approaches a pool of dirty water, which angers her, and she asks why they are following the bad guys there. Sig says that something is bothering him. He says this while dodging a dagger coming towards him, picking up another with his fingers, and thanking them for the warm welcome afterwards. A group of warriors stand in front of him. They ask him what they are doing here. Sig explains that he is only here to buy information and then asks where the guild leader island. The man with the combed hair asks what kind of nonsense he is talking about and tells him to leave immediately. The hero raises his hand, asking him to calm down, saying that they are not there to fight and repeating his request to speak with the guild leader. However, the man refuses and accuses him of nonsense. Sig takes a deep breath and quickly immobilizes him, throwing him hard to the ground where he screams in pain. At that moment, everyone attacks the hero, calling him stupid. However, he quickly manages to subdue a girl and throws her to the ground, then jumps on the man with the ponytail. He kicks him in the head, causing him to bleed. Sig takes his position and asks who's next, but someone appears, saying, "That's enough." Looking at the hero's group, he notices that they are not as weak as he had imagined. Smiling, he says, "From the top of the castle to the depths of the groundwater, welcome to the Underground Guild, the center of all information." This person is Arthos, the leader of the Underground Guild. After walking for a while, they arrive at the headquarters of the Underground Guild. Manhwa wastes no time, eating everything in sight. Arthos asks the hero how much time has passed. He replies that it has been 5 years since they last spoke at Barton Palace. He points out that 5 years is enough time to change people. Watching Manhwa eat non-stop, he says he is not sure if she can change and asks her to take it slow. With her mouth full, she asks if she really needs to justify herself. Seg turns to say that he will explain why he is here. He takes some papers out of his coat, saying that he wants to buy information about the people listed in them. Arthos says that the information on them may already be known to the hero. Having heard that the hero has forced many people to confess, not understanding the direction of the conversation, Sig asks what he is talking about. However, Arthos says that many people still believe, so, who knows, right? Looking at the list, he says he will tell everything about them, making it clear that it will not be just empty talk. Saying this, he drops the papers in shock and tells the protagonist that these people are the dogs of the underworld, who are reaping the rewards of various illegal operations such as human trafficking and prostitution. These words shock the protagonist, and he immediately asks Arthos if he, the Death Warrior, knows about all this. He stares carefully at the protagonist and explains that the victims made a request and were deceived. He emphasizes that there is only one person who handles this kind of business, and that is the Prince of Garbage, Pia's Amelia. When he appears, it means that the week are finished. Angry, Sig begins to piece together what Ya said about the pious doll. He then asks Arthos, who he thinks is really responsible for all this. After thinking, Arthos says that based on what Tokras and Bass said, it can't be them, so he suspects the third son, the wandering prince, Frizz. The hero replies that he understands everything and thanks him, confirming that he now has an idea of the situation and knows how to act before leaving immediately. After Sig leaves, Arthos falls into deep thought and asks the person next to him what they will do, because Sig knows too much. The person replies that he is an obstacle to the future of the country, but that very night, they will send him to hell, saying this with a dark and mysterious look. Darkness falls. The hero lies down on the bed. However, someone arrives at his location, approaches the bed, and quickly draws a long sword, ready to stab the hero. But before he can do so, Saskin rushes out of the closet, immediately stopping the attack. Saskin notices that the person seems to have good intuition, but he ensures that there will be a killing that night. The hero wakes up immediately, ready to respond, surprising the masked person. But with no time to defend himself, Seg strikes him on the shoulder. Noticing that the person has a basic fighting style, Saskin demands that the intruder surrender, as there is no escape. However, the person jumps out the window. Saskin is angry that they let the person escape and yells at the guards to catch this individual. At that moment, the hero's eyes catch something on the ground. Noticing some gold cords, he picks them up, believing he has found evidence as the gold cords belong to the shoulder pins of noble individuals. At that moment, the suspect continues to run inside the palace, and stops after a short while. The suspect begins to remove his disguise. This person is Reina, one of Princess Lorala's guards, who is very worried that her cover will be blown. She quickly knocks on the door, introducing herself and asking if she can come in. Someone opens the door, noticing the worried expression on the guard's face. This person is the princess herself, who immediately asks her to come in and then asks what happened. Rina lowers her head, apologizing. Lorelia takes a deep breath, asking her to relax and asking if she is well. However, Sig arrives, pushing the door open forcefully, surprising Rina. She immediately turns around as the hero scoffs, asking if she has finally revealed herself, thanking her for the kind guidance afterwards. Immediately, Rina becomes angry, placing her hand on her sword and shouting that this is the princess's room. No matter how much of a knight he is, what he did was hugely disrespectful. He informs the princess that he is here to deal with crimes because he thought the culprit was Todd or Bass, and possibly the exiled prince. However, he was actually completely wrong, because the culprit was someone else entirely. He explains that the real culprit, or rather, the real criminal, was Princess Lore. Without showing any reaction, Seg asks if he has any evidence to support this claim. He smiles, puts his hand inside his coat, and pulls out pieces of the golden rope he took when he cut the suspect, saying that it closely resembles that on the royal guard's uniform. They both look at it, while he explains that it is difficult to conclude someone's guilt based on that alone. However, he had another, more conclusive method. He shows her his cat, explaining that a saber-toothed tiger's sense of smell is much stronger than that of a tracking dog, and that a single strand of rope was enough. He then asks if she understands his reasoning. Calling her a fool, Rhea becomes angry, draws her sword, and calls him a bastard. However, the princess quickly asks her to stand down. Rhea immediately turns around, incredulous, and asks why. Lore asks everyone to sit down because the discussion, standing up, was a little strange. Seg agrees. After sitting down, Sig gets straight to the point and asks why these nobles were assassinated. The princess explains that they were all evil and deserved to die. However, Sig points out that this is something he already knew. What he really wanted to know was why she went to the trouble of assassinating corrupt nobles when she had nothing to gain. Lorelei begins to explain that she really didn't care about their misdeeds. However, with her wedding day approaching, Todris and Bass tried to sell her off to the aristocrats, explaining that no matter how old or corrupt they were, if she was sold to someone who would only strengthen her own power, it would be acceptable to her. Seg asks if the king would allow this without noticing. Quickly, she asks what he was trying to imply about her father. Lore also explains that power is everything, that the powerful have everything, and that a position like her father's would not help someone as weak as her. And then she decides to make the decision. She wears a dress she doesn't even like and shows a strange, unfamiliar smile. After being described as the Tongo in Amelia, she manages to escape the noble's plans. Sig, not understanding the direction of the conversation, asks what all this has to do with murder. She explains that she lived among social circles and nobles to survive and witness the injustices committed by the nobles. She also remembers a time when Barwa said, "If you don't like it, leaving might be a better solution." She asks if that's not what he said. She explains that it was a situation she simply couldn't leave, because she tried to turn that place into a place where she could belong. When she introduced Frizard Olivani, the opposing nobles were incredulous, and with the support of the nobles, they dealt with the corrupt aristocrats. Sig, uninterested in her explanations, says she was romanticizing the story because it was ultimately to her own advantage. Lore feels embarrassed and admits she won't deny it. She approaches Sig and makes him uncomfortable about why, but quickly kneels before him. Sig asks what the hell she is doing. She explains that, as he said, it started out simply as a matter of survival. However, at that moment, she was concerned about the country and its people. Immediately, Rina rushes toward her, yelling at her to stop saying such things. However, Lore explains that she won't ask for much, but she still asks Sig if he can turn a blind eye this time. She will do anything. He immediately raises his hand, grabs her chin, and asks if she is really serious. She replies awkwardly, yes. He smiles with a mysterious look and says, if that's the case, then. But at that moment, several guards appear. Saxon orders everyone to stop. However, a sword fight breaks out between Rina and Sig, making the atmosphere tense. Sig turns and tells Saxon that he is too late, but Saxon only asks Sig to leave it to him, as he will handle it from now on. Saxon yells at Rina and Princess Laurel, Amelia shortly after, saying he will arrest them for harming an aristocrat. After everything that happens, Sig returns to the princess's room, but notices two guards on duty at the door, blocking his way. One of them turns around and asks why he is there. Sig simply replies that it's just a silly visit. The guard explains that long conversations are prohibited and asks him to enter quickly. When they open the door, he notices the princess sitting desperately on the floor. He walks calmly toward her and stops right in front of her. She turns around and asks if he is there to mock her. He takes a deep breath and says, not at all, I just had an idea. Sig kneels down and whispers something to the princess. After that, some time passes and some people get into a fight. Sig and Albert continue their training. Sig takes his stance and prepares his attack. Albert wastes no time and attacks as well, but Sig uses his ability to switch instantly, dodges the attack, prepares for a counterattack and strikes, but Albert easily blocks it. Sig quickly turns around and attacks again, but Albert was also ready, grabbing Sig's arm and making him worry about what would come next. But Sig tries to do something about it, grabbing his sword with his other hand and attacking Albert again. However, the knight also defends the attack, throws Seg's sword aside, and then throws Seg to the ground, causing him to scream in pain. Albert explains to him that the Jegal family's fencing technique compensates for a lack of mana with skill and movement, pointing out that this is actually a good thing. While Seg lies in pain on the ground, however, Albert also explains that Seg's total mana is much lower than the others, and this will not work against truly powerful opponents. Sig begins to laugh, saying that he already knows this, which is why he learned the Sigmund fighting techniques. However, he explains that despite this, he is not ready to give up his style because he likes to incorporate the Sig method. Albert takes a deep breath, saying that if that is what he wants, there is nothing that can be done. Sig changes his expression and tells Albert that he would like to say something before they fight. The knight quickly warns him that if it is about his son, he has no intention of listening. He recalls the time when he was training with his son there. When his son also hit him in the nose with his head, he responded to his son and threw him forcefully to the ground. Angry at his son, he asked how he dared to hit his father with his head, explaining that he was not even worthy of being called a knight of the Jegal family. After that, Sigmund starts laughing and asks his father if the important thing is to win and who will care about honor in the fight. Albert, still angry, asks Sigmund if he really intends to leave the Frederick family. Sig stands up, saying he has had enough. He then asks his father if he will keep his promise to let him take the sword's shadow. After recalling past events, Albert explains to Sig that Sigmund died defending him, yet Sig took his son's inheritance. He stares intently at Sig and begins to see his son in him, saying he has seen enough. He immediately changes the subject, saying that it would be better for them to discuss what Seg wants because he won the bet and it is time to help him get involved in Prince Bass's plan. Seg replies that it is not yet time for that kind of conversation because he will take care of everything when the followers of the blind gather with the authorities. After saying this, some time passes and Sig goes to Paz, who is drinking tea at that moment. He asks if Paz has already decided on the security he earned from the duel with Lord Albert, and if he can use it to help him. Sig gets to the point, saying that before discussing that matter, Bass must give him the reward for the mission he completed. Bass tries to cover up, admitting that this is true, and that he forgot to ask what Sig wanted, either to rebuild his family or to receive a sum of money equivalent to the mission, although Piaz doubts Seg's ability to complete the task. Seg takes a deep breath, puts on a scary expression, and says that his only demand will be the complete withdrawal of all the best weapons shops from the kingdom of Amelia. Upon hearing this, Piaz quickly changes his expression, asking what he means by that. Sig asks Piaz if he understands what the best weapons represent, as the Argo family controls the arms trade across the continent, even sending mercenaries to kill him. He then asks the prince if he remembers the motto he once mentioned, repay gratitude twice and resentment tenfold. Bias begins to get angry, wondering why Sig would ask for the best weapons. He wonders what Sig will gain from this. Bias takes a deep breath and says that he understands for now because they have an agreement, so he will do his best. However, he imagines that for now he will have to follow Sig, but later he will have to remove him from the picture. Sig thanks him, saying that before that, there is something else he needs to do. Hearing this, Piaz begins to get angry, saying that Seg has overstepped his bounds by demanding the complete withdrawal of the best weapons and wants to know what else he will ask for. Seg asks with a serious look if he really thinks all this was to end the conflict over the royal succession. Then he asks the prince, who is intrigued by Sig's question, if he wants him to do something about it. Sig explains that he has heard that Lorelei's trial will take place in a few days, and asks the prince to gather all the nobles of New Timon. The bigger the stage for the fight for the royal succession, the better. Bias confidently says that he will now be able to overthrow Todris and take the throne, imagining that if he becomes king, the question of the best weapon will be irrelevant. He stands up and says that it was a great choice, and that he will proceed as planned. Before leaving, he makes it clear that he will do everything to become king, asking Sig to rest afterwards. He says this and leaves shortly after, leaving Sig to ponder the outcome of the conversation. However, someone appears, asking if that is all his group said and that he said a lot. Minerva explains that the prince is still a disgusting human being, as he was hiding his intentions. Sig looks at her, saying that her intuition seems to be very sharp. Sio, worried about her master, asks if he will really do what Pius asked. Sig simply replies that it would not be kind to reveal anything at this time as he is not yet ready, leaving the two upset that he is not sharing his plans with them. However, he puts on a mysterious face, saying that when the actors are lined up, and the stage is set. The story of those who got him into this mess will simply come to an end. After that conversation, somewhere else, someone falls heavily to the ground. It was the son of the owner of the best weapon shop. He asks what is going on there. Rosas explains that he was on official business and immediately demands that he not speak, as they are investigating several allegations, explaining that if he tries to obstruct anything, the punishment will be severe. While some guards carry the boxes, the owner's son shouts, asking what the hell this tax island. However, his father arrived, saying that it was understandable, but he made it clear that he would have preferred to be informed in advance, as the support he had might have made a difference. He noticed that Piaz was there and assumed that Piaz had done something, pointing out that, although there were some disappointments, this was a bit excessive. The prince simply apologized, but explained that this time it was not just a routine financial investigation. He explained that someone had ordered the dismantling of, quote, the entire franchise of the best weapons spread across the continent. Immediately, the owner of one of the stores was shocked by this sudden turn of events. His son shouted angrily, asking why he was planning to dismantle the best store in the country. Bias explained that it was for the following reasons: illegal money trading and even allegations of bribery. The reasons for the financial investigation were sufficient. Still angry, he tried to explain that all the shop's money was his personal sponsorship, making the closure of the shops unacceptable. Baz approached him, laughing, and asked if he had also received bribes from Lord Todris, as they were walking a tightrope to see who would take the throne. In addition, there were some other allegations such as exploitation and fraud against different races, and that the number of weapons had increased due to the exploitation of dwarves. Laughing, Mr. Argus then asked what he thought of all that. The old man simply commented that merchants had their own ways of surviving. Base quickly laughed evilly and asked if that was really true, then wondered about what Argus had said about the assassination attempt on the hero. Soon, both of them were surprised to learn that Piaz had found out. The prince also explained that a group called the Raven, a mercenary group consisting of SSS-class mercenaries, left no survivors in the missions they carried out, especially the leader Mark Blinter, as he had heard that Blinter was a skilled individual capable of fighting an entire army on his own. By hiring such a person to assassinate Amelia's hero, Bias made it clear that if he hadn't covered up the incident, they would all be in prison. Argos took a deep breath, saying that the prince was right, but he was worried that he would be pressured in this way and would have to consider contacting Lord Todris. The prince quickly laughed evilly, saying that there would be no problem at all if he did so, explaining that he had already won, so the news would spread soon. Argos became anxious, imagining that something was wrong. His son yelled at Piaz, saying that it was all nonsense because Lord Piaz's influence was weaker than Lord Todris's. Disliking his son's impulsiveness, he asked the big man to take him quietly to a secluded place. His son began to shout desperately, demanding to be allowed to come along too. After taking him away, the huge man returned with a treasure, and Argos asked Piaz to accept it as compensation for his son's inappropriate behavior, as he was frustrated. Bias began to laugh and said that he would indeed consider this a sincere apology for his son's rudeness. He also explained that Argos need not worry because when he finally became king, everything would return to the way it was before. With that, he left, leaving the three of them there, incredulous at what had just happened. Argos quickly turned to his son and said that he had once again shown himself to be useless, as they were knights, not assassins, who hired others to kill. His angry son asked his father if he had done something wrong, as he had only wanted to punish Sig. His father explained that what Sig had done in the shop at that time was indeed an insult, but added that it was also his son's fault for not checking whether the merchandise was the cursed sword. Argos takes a deep breath, then says that dealing with him seemed inappropriate at the moment, which immediately surprised him. He says this and quickly walks away. His son begins to cry profusely, tears streaming down his face, saying that he just wanted his father to acknowledge him. The big man quickly approaches him, trying to calm him down, asking him not to be disappointed because he was sure his father did it out of love for his son. However, he does not listen, consumed by anger, imagining that he has once again made Sig look bad in front of his father and that it was all his fault. However, he quickly changes his expression, saying that sacrifices will be inevitable once the cursed sword is sealed, everything will end, and he asks the huge man if they have another cursed sword. He says this, as his servant holds up an evil cursed sword that emits a bloody aura. The servant asks him to back off, because if it weren't for the guard's gloves, he would have easily taken it. However, he is mesmerized as he stares intently at the sword, and then approaches it as the huge man urges him not to come closer because it could be dangerous. Nevertheless, the sword begins to call out to him, urging him to come closer, promising to grant him the power he has always wanted and fulfill all his desires. The huge man tries to grab him to prevent him from taking the sword, as it could indeed be dangerous. However, he ignores this, grabbing the sword immediately afterwards, instantly releasing a powerful energy that envelops his entire body. Then, an image of a woman appears before him, asking him to burn and kill, because she will give him all the power. He becomes very anxious because he does not understand anything. He soon realizes that he is in another place where everything seems evil. As he thinks about this, he notices someone walking toward him, stopping right in front of him, and immediately surprising him. Looking at her, he realizes how powerful she island. He then asks who she island. She smiles and introduces herself as Artemis, the Sword of Desire, explaining that she will stay with the shopkeeper's son until he turns to ashes. She stares at him intensely with her terrifying aura, causing him to bow immediately, turning him into her servant as she shows a little of her power, saying that she will burn everything. This is the Sword Artemis, the Sword of Desire that amplifies the user's desires, being a flaming blade with a fiery guardian that stirs up a crimson flame, capable of shooting flames like a dragon's breath. After that, in the streets of Ibelin, Rossus leads the princess and her royal guard to their trial. He shouts that the killer of the nobles has been found, as they have been causing much tragedy in recent months. The main defendant, Rhea Smaliu of the royal guard, demands her release angrily. Her accomplice, Princess Lore, is also presented. Amelia, the princess, looks at Rhea and imagines that she does not regret dragging Rhea into this conflict or even using the courtyard battle, as it was all part of her plan. However, she pulls at her dress, feeling guilty. But she quickly notices a bouquet of flowers in front of her, realizing that a little girl was offering them to her. Immediately, the princess begins to cry, imagining that she was not entirely wrong in what she did, especially since she noticed that most of the people around her were moved by her. She smiles, saying that she is very grateful to them. After saying that, she tries to take the flowers from the child. However, the guard knocks the bouquet away, throwing it far away, leaving her surprised by the childish behavior. Rossus looks at her and tells her that it is time. Lost in thought, Laura imagines that she can never back down and will place the future of this country in the hands of Seg, the warrior of death. Inside the palace, in the king's hall, there was a lot of chatter, with some saying that the rightful heir should be Prince Todris. However, others commented that in the past, people did not know that Prince Piaz was the most popular choice, and that there was still a rumor that not only the Death Warrior but also the Knight Albert had become partners with Prince Piaz. This explains why Prince Todris is sitting with such a stern expression. Immediately, the king becomes nervous and asks everyone to be quiet. Looking at his daughter, he feels disappointed and says that she has done something interesting. She explains that she has just purged the parasites that were devouring the kingdom. Her father curiously asks her why. Looking into her father's eyes, she explains that she was killing the noble bastards who were destroying the kingdom. Full of confidence, she takes a deep breath, saying that she would do it all again. However, she is upset when someone says she was wrong because she was nothing more than a murderer. Her brother, Piaz, explains that there would have been more sacrifices if he hadn't solved the problem, and that if things had continued, the honor of Amelia's family would have fallen even further. He turns to the crowd and asks if he is right. Quickly, the crowd goes wild, supporting the prince and demanding the execution of the noble's killer. He feels elated by the people's support, imagining that he is the right person because he is strong and deserves to be king. He begins to remember when he was a weak boy and his mother put her hand on his head, asking why he was crying. His face bruised and gloomy, he asks his mother why he cannot have dinner with his father and older brother, wondering if it is because of his hair color, which was different. She simply asks him to think about his father's words, or rather, those of his royal highness. He cries and begins to speak. The strong take everything. Looking at the royal throne, he says that if anyone wants to achieve something, they must be strong to the end. Piaz, he ponders for a moment and quickly turns around, asking the hero what he thought because he heard that the hero had something to say about recent events. Sig takes a deep breath and says that he did, but it was something that needed to be said to everyone. Bias, looking at the hero, imagines that Sig has promised him loyalty. However, the hero turns away, leaving the prince terribly frightened as Sig makes a strange face. Without wasting any time, the hero points his fingers at Todris and Bias, saying that they are bastards and should never appear in this world again. He says this and the atmosphere becomes tense, creating absolute silence. However, shortly after, the crowd and the nobles become angry, asking what he just said, as they had praised him a little for being a warrior. But apparently, he knew nothing, demanding that he be arrested for defamation against the royal family. At that moment, King Winston shouts for silence, leaving everyone surprised by the sudden request. With a serious look, the king asks the hero to continue speaking. Seg puts his hand inside his coat, saying that he will show the list of victims as well as the targets who were the nobles. He throws them on the ground, most of them stained with blood. The first was about the Hanswin train that kidnapped girls and forced them into prostitution. The second was Afila Rodrigo, who lent money at high interest rates to people and sold them to slave traders if they did not pay. Seg explains that there is more, as all these criminals had something in common, leaving the atmosphere tense once again as everyone falls completely silent. The hero also explains that part of the money they earned was given to certain people to keep these incidents secret. Looking at the princes, the hero asks if he is wrong, leaving them both terrified. Seg also points out that it was the princes who led the corruption and that the princess simply put an end to it, then asks who exactly insulted the Amelia family name. Pius, frightened, begins to try to explain, saying that everything the hero said is nothing but a conspiracy, asking how the hero dared to say such words about the royal family. Todris, now angry, punches the table, agreeing with his brother and declaring that what his sister did was murder, as there were no witnesses to support her either. No sooner has he said this than someone appears, walking in and asking if he has requested a witness by chance. Everyone is surprised, because it is one of the strongest knights, Albert Frederick. Todris quickly looks at the knight, asking what the hell he is doing there. Albert simply looks outside and asks everyone to listen to the voices coming from there, where several people were shouting for the princess to be freed, saying she was innocent. Lore hears all this and begins to cry with happiness because she was known by the people. Seg explains that all this was to prove the princess's innocence, as all the people gathered there to show it. The hero looks at her and asks her to ascend the throne immediately. She turns around in surprise, asking what he is trying to say. He simply asks her to take responsibility for the work she started by becoming queen, as this was her path from the beginning. Still crying, she asks the hero if he planned all this by chance. Quickly, everyone there bows before her. Albert Frederick explains that he is committed to serving Princess Lore in front of all those gathered there, who are crying. She asks why, because she was nothing but a murderer. At that moment, everyone starts shouting and cheering her name, leaving her embarrassed as she looks at the hero, imagining that it is all thanks to him. However, she is surprised to see him bowing as well, greeting her. Immediately, she pulls up her dress, feeling happy. At that moment, her father approaches, smiling, saying that she no longer seems afraid. She responds affirmatively. The king explains that a ruler does not need to be talented, a virgin, or male, which angers his sons. But as he places the crown on his daughter's head, he says that there is one more thing to say, which is that a person must be strong to rule. After that, everyone begins to celebrate and cheer for the princess. Looking at her, the king explains that she seems stronger at that moment, asking everyone to cheer for Amelia's first queen. After that, she goes to her room. Her maids follow her, happy to serve the queen. Lorelei remembers her father's words that the king must be strong because they must become the sun who looks at the world from above everyone else. And to preserve the kingdom, she will have to turn a blind eye to certain events. And the stronger she becomes, the more isolated she will become, asking her to remember this well, because under the king's throne, there is inevitably bloodshed. She also remembers when her father asked her if she was really ready to become such a presence. However, she replied, no, there would be no bloodshed in Amelia under her rule. Since her father appeared higher than anyone else, like the sun, she would care for even the lowest places and would also be the Sunday. He asked her if she could prove it. The princess answered, yes, asking him to wait while he saw Amelia's future. After getting fully dressed, Rhea tells the princess that it is time. The two are happy. Looking at themselves in the mirror, Lorelei jokes with Reyna, asking how she looks at that moment, wearing the queen's costume. Rhea replies that she really was Amelia's son, but explains to the queen that if she doesn't hurry, she will lose it. Quickly, she gets up from the chair, feeling embarrassed as she thinks about the hero. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the hero is with his group, asking Sui if she has packed everything. Since the work is now done, they will proceed according to the original plan. Sui, worried about the hero, asks why he has to leave suddenly every time. Seg explains that he doesn't want to get involved in troublesome matters anymore, so he needs to get away sometimes to sort everything out. However, he notices that Manhwa is sulking as usual and asks her if she is going to continue like this, but she ignores him. They continue walking through the beautiful garden. But soon the hero stops, surprised to see the queen there with Reyna. Embarrassed, Lorelei asks the hero if he is trying to leave without saying goodbye. He greets her, but she replies, not yet, and immediately takes off her crown. Looking at it, she explains that she hasn't had her coronation yet, that she sometimes wonders if the crown will be too heavy for her, and that she is worried because she wanted to be free, like the hero. Quickly, Seg points his finger, saying that's silly because she started all this, and asks her to take responsibility and see it through to the end. Ria gets angry, saying the hero is a jerk because he always dares to disrespect the princess. But Lorelei simply asks her to calm down, saying everything is fine. However, Lorelei asks the hero to take responsibility as well. He is confused, asking what she means. She explains that she followed him because she admired him for condemning those corrupt aristocrats. She then asks the hero to also take responsibility for the things he started. Seg, looking at her, asks if she really wants him to take responsibility. She answers, yes, embarrassed. The hero approaches her, saying that if she changes, he will return to condemn her. This makes her even more embarrassed because it seemed like a double entendre. She takes on a mission and comes to talk to him, asking if he is still in the process of completing Sigmar's mission because she has taken on Carbum's mission. She continues to joke, saying that it seems he will not charge her for it. He laughs, saying that debt is something he avoids at all costs. She feels embarrassed again, but does not notice Hala approaching. Menorpha and Sue were the girls who were jealous of the hero, but the princess quickly realizes this and changes the subject. Sig pats the princess on the head and leaves, saying that her hairstyle is wonderful and suits her well, which makes her even more embarrassed to the point of kneeling on the ground, which worries Reina about her. Lorelei turns around and watches the hero walk away with his group, wondering when they will meet again. After that, they go to the city. The hero, noticing that Minerva is in a bad mood, decides to ask her why she is acting this way. Driven mad with rage, she yells that it's because he's always fighting with Zoe and never uses her. Quickly, the hero asks her to stop causing trouble because he doesn't want to attract anyone's attention there. Zoe agrees with her sister, asking the hero to understand her a little more. She further explains that demon swords are always connected to those with whom they have formed a bond, which is why whenever they are separated, they feel anxious and lonely. Looking at her older sister, she explains that this is why Minerva was always sullen because she felt lonely. However, Minerva listens to Sui's explanation angrily and says that it's all a lie because she was simply bored. The hero smiles and tells Minerva that she has a somewhat cute side, and with his hand on her head, he asks her to always tell him when she feels lonely. At that moment, Zoe tries to take advantage of what Seg just said, claiming that she was lonely too. Manhwa, nervous as usual, simply explains that she was always near the hero because she got free food while he remained focused. He looks at the paper he received from the princess. However, he suddenly stops, causing Manhwa to bump into his back. Annoyed, she curses him, then asks why he stopped so suddenly. Zoe also becomes concerned, asking what happened. The hero was worried about the mission at hand, saying that if it was the person he met, he wonders if he should chase after him, but he also thinks it might be better not to, because this guy was a big jerk. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the person the hero was talking about was preparing some people, and some of his friends told him that the organization was ready. He smiles and twirls his staff among several mutilated corpses, then asks where they should carry out justice. Back where the hero was, he becomes worried because these people were really crazy. Some time passes, and elsewhere, the warrior, whom the hero described as a fool, approaches the nobleman, pointing his spear at Viscount Philip Gamos and saying that he has committed a sin by delving into magic and conducting experiments on the kingdom's inhabitants. He introduces himself as Karis, the warrior of justice, and declares that he will execute him for his crimes. Philip begins to laugh, calling him ridiculous, and stabs his servant in the chest with a knife, saying that he really thought one of the 5 great heroes would protect him. He says this as his servant begins to transform completely, becoming larger and more muscular, then jumps and lands forcefully next to the warrior of justice, causing a huge explosion. Karis must protect himself from the shockwave coming his way. When the dust settles, the evil gaze of Philip's servant becomes visible. At that moment, the Viscount orders his servant to show his true power to the hero, who dared to invade his territory. Immediately, the barbarian lunges toward the warrior, who stands his ground, gathering energy in his spear. Then he lunges with all his might toward the barbarian, piercing him in half with the tremendous force of his spear. Karis stands firm as the Viscount rushes toward his servant, who is easily defeated. However, the warrior of justice wastes no time and gathers more energy in his spear, throwing it toward the Viscount, who is terrified as he sees the huge, energy-filled spear rapidly approaching him, but it is too late for him to dodge, and he is defeated, causing massive destruction to his palace due to the powerful attack. After the attack, Carthage walks towards his spear and hears people shouting his name, causing him to turn around immediately, noticing many people running towards him, shouting that he has appeared there to save the kingdom. However, one of these people quickly becomes confused when he sees something evil in front of him. The people with him have been brutally killed by the warrior of justice. In shock, he screams, asking Karshnabal why he is doing this because they were victims of Philip Gamo's experiments. He says this, and then pierces his body with the warrior of justice, who explains that he knew. but that it all happened because of their weakness, because weakness is a sin, and he is the one who punishes sinners. He explains that above all, in such tragic events, there must be no survivors so that he can stand out. He says this and then throws the survivor's body forcefully to the ground. Shortly after, he hears someone calling him and turns around immediately. It was his friends. The girl was happy to know that the warrior of justice was fine. She approaches him and asks if she is fine too. She replies yes and thanks him for his concern. But she quickly notices something and says that there were apparently no survivors. Karishnabul starts laughing and says yes, because he found them and, by chance, it ended in a tragic accident because justice is based on the living. The girl ponders this, but soon the warrior starts laughing, saying that they are done here and asks if they can move on to the next mission. She gets excited and shouts yes. They look intently at the paper to see what their next mission will be. Meanwhile, elsewhere, the hero is nervous, asking the old man to change it. However, the old man replies that he does not want to change it. Minerva, annoyed, asks the old man to stop because the person on the paper is very evil, and if the old man does not listen, the warrior will not leave him alone. The old man, now very worried, says that the princess had suddenly assigned the hero a task in a troubling situation, so they rush to complete it, and it won't be easy to remove. Sage puts his hand on Zoe and Minerva's shoulders and asks the old man to look at them closely because they were like an older and younger sister. He also explains that it would not be good to take children on an S-class mission because it would be very dangerous. The old man raises his finger and asks the hero to change his mind. He then explains that the holy nation of Carbon is home to elves and dwarves. It was under colonial rule for centuries and only gained its independence 5 years ago. Resources from all over the world flow into this place, making it the perfect opportunity for his precious sisters to experience the cultures of the entire world. The old man also insists that the mission leading to Toriazan is only there, and the old man imagines internally that he had no intention of going through the trouble of changing the mission. Minerva, who has already become skeptical, asks the hero what they will do and whether they will stick to the plan anyway. He grits his teeth and becomes tense, saying that it won't be possible because he wanted to avoid that person at all costs. At that moment, someone arrives cheerfully, asking if the person in front of him is the warrior of death. Seg looks ahead and notices that it is Kar Shapel, the warrior of justice, and his group, and feels frustrated that he should have avoided this. At that moment, Minerva pushes him, making him flustered. However, she asks the hero if he is jealous in any way. As Kar approaches the hero, he says that it has been a long time since they last met. Sig replies that it seems Kar has lived a very good life during the time they have not seen each other. Quickly, Kar's girlfriend becomes annoyed, draws the hero's attention, and says that even though he is one of the 5 great warriors, what kind of nonsense is he saying to Kar? Kar interrupts her, saying that she is intruding on a conversation between old friends. The hero becomes pensive, imagining that he doesn't want to get involved. But he remembers the promise he made to return the cats to where they originally came from. He thinks about it and turns to look at them. Sig takes a deep breath and asks if this is the first time. The old man is pleased, saying that he has planned well. With the 5 great heroes by his side, there will be nothing to worry about at all. The old man also explains that a group of thieves has recently started causing trouble in his neighborhood, and with a serious face, he asks them to get ready as something big awaits them. Then they set off on their journey, and a mysterious girl inside one of the carriages imagines that the trip will be comfortable. They continue their journey. Minerva is curious and tells Sui that the hero is acting very strangely. She looks at him and explains that since Kar's arrival, he has become eccentric and no longer responds to her calls. Upon hearing this, Sui rushes over to him and asks if he is having any problems because of Kar and how she can help. Seiji turns to her and asks her not to worry, saying that everything is fine. However, he becomes pensive, remembering that at that time, he was attacked by Kar, who left a scar on his eye. He puts his hand over his eye and reassures Sui once again that there is no need to worry. They continue their journey, facing a severe snowstorm, passing through difficult terrain, and worst of all, the wind is very cold. At that moment, Minerva sneezes and immediately rushes to hug the tiger, trying to warm herself up, complaining that it is too cold and that she is freezing. Sig notices her shivering, and says he asked her to change her clothes. He points to Sui and asks Minerva to watch her because she did not suffer from the same cold problem because Sui listened to him. Feeling sorry for Minerva, Seg takes off his coat and gives it to her, asking her to stop crying. Embarrassed, Minerva thanks the hero, then says that this was to be expected from her servant. After walking, they arrive at the neutral zone on the border of Carbon and head straight to a tavern where everyone drinks happily. Minerva is bored and asks the hero if this place is called Carbon by chance. He replies, no, it's just the neutral zone near the border. Seg also explains that the holy nation of Carbon was founded by various species that were persecuted by humans and that elves, dwarves, harpies, ghouls, wolves, and other humanoid species make up the majority of Carbon. He then comments that for hundreds of years, Carbon has been in isolation to avoid being enslaved by humans again. Manhwa feels uncomfortable with what she has just heard from the hero, saying that humans always seem to choose to commit evil deeds. But she is quickly surprised when she hears a dwarf comment that one day, different species will be able to cross the continent freely. They watch the dwarf, imagining that he will join the conversation without being invited. He goes on to explain that the Carbon king, Dimitri, worked hard for a world without discrimination between species. The dwarf also explains that the beginning of trade with foreign countries is entirely due to the king's efforts. Cass hears everything his friend has just said and approaches, asking Jinanon to relax, but he insists that it is because of the king that places like this land have emerged, with no laws, no taxes, and no masters. At that moment, Seg becomes angry and asks the car group if they don't have their own table. The blonde young man says, embarrassed, that all the places were already taken. However, he asks if he can at least serve them a decent meal, which makes Minerva and Sue salivate over the food in front of them. Minerva looks at her plate and comments that the sauce is very tasty, and that the meal is perfect for relieving physical fatigue. She then digs into the food. However, someone bangs on the table hard, causing the food to fly everywhere, which immediately upsets Minerva. Seg places his hand on her head and asks her to bear with it. A strange drunk man falls onto their table and quickly apologizes for ruining the meal. Seg looks seriously at the drunk man and asks if he will pay for the meal. He smiles and asks why he should pay, but he doesn't even notice that the hero is aiming a punch at him, hitting him hard and sending him flying to the end of the bar. Quickly, the drunk's friends rush to help him, asking if he's okay, and also asking the hero if he's crazy and who he even island. The drunk yells at the hero, asking what the hell he thinks he's doing. But as soon as he asks that, a shadow passes right in front of him. He is terrified as he sees the hero's sword settle right in front of him. Sig approaches him and, with an evil look, asks again if he will pay for the meal he ruined. Quickly, the man grabs a bag of coins and hands it to the hero, saying that's all they have. As Sig turns away, he hears Kar say that he is too forgiving about some things. This worries the hero, who asks Kar to wait a moment, explaining that it was all just a misunderstanding. Kar explains to the hero that a warrior cannot show mercy to a villain. Saying this, he punches him in the shoulder and sends him flying backwards. As his followers rush to help him, the frightened man asks Kar's name, but Kar simply tells him that he has no name for a villain. The hero is angered by Kar's behavior and says that as a warrior of justice, he should not act this way. He says this as the followers help their leader out of there, and the angry leader makes it clear that he will never forget this day. He then asks Kar why he has been grumbling, and why he has been so quiet over the past few weeks. Kar takes a deep breath and says that 2 of the 5 great heroes were ready there and asks the hero if he was thinking of attacking. Sig simply replies that Kar is the one who caused all this trouble, so why would he want to involve him? After that, they continue their journey, but they hear someone say that they were waiting for them, which makes them immediately look up. They notice that it is the drunk from the bar earlier, asking them if they thought he forgot what happened. But he wasn't alone. The person behind him prepares a quick attack, tells the 2 drunks below to consider what is about to happen a salute, and tells them to go straight to hell. At that moment, the person with him at the top of the dam attacks, causing a huge explosion, which immediately worries the hero because the dam has broken, and they are about to die as the water rushes towards them, leaving everyone in a state of panic. Sig wastes no time and tells them to leave immediately. Kar shouts for them to take only the essentials and abandon the carts. Sig notices the old man standing motionless, saying nothing, and tells him to move or he will die. The old man turns around with a strange smile and explains that he can never run away and abandon the mission, as that would be a disgrace for a merchant like him, and that he would rather face death than abandon the mission. The hero is horrified when he remembers that if the old man dies, he will not receive any reward. Therefore, he decides to help him. He takes a deep breath and says to leave it to him, that he will deal with the problem. The old man fearfully asks the hero if he has a plan. Kar approaches, saying that the hero was both brave and stubborn. However, the hero stands motionless, waiting for the water to collapse on him, while Kar asks if he will handle it alone. At that moment, he calls out to Seg Sui, quickly grabs her, and begins to gather energy. Kar watches the hero in surprise, wondering if it is some kind of magic. Sig creates an ice coffin on his sword, saying it is a unique ability of Sui, which quickly freezes everything around them, launches it toward the oncoming wave, collides with it, and instantly freezes the massive wave, preventing it from crashing down on the convoy. Everyone is amazed, watching everything freeze easily. While the hero takes a deep breath, Kar approaches the hero, saying that he is impressed by the magical freezing power, and that he never thought the hero possessed such power. Sig is concerned. thinking that he should have been caught using a demonic sword, but he asks Car not to worry. However, Car becomes serious, grabs his spear, and explains to the hero that he will indeed worry because if he discovers that the hero acquired the power he displayed by unfair means, he will execute him immediately. But soon the old man approaches them, elated, and tells the hero that he never believed that the warrior of death possessed magical powers, and that he is very grateful to him for saving his life. Sig looks up and simply asks the old man not to worry, then urges him to gather his belongings and his agent and flee immediately. The old man asks the hero, confused, why he must flee so quickly when the flood is frozen. Sig simply points upward, where the drunkard's followers are seen rushing toward them. The old man quickly runs to gather his things while Car explains to the hero that the situation is not in their favor and that they will talk later. Sig simply asks him to stop wasting time and deal with the mess he caused earlier. As the drunkard approaches the hero, he notices everything around him. He is curious to see that everyone has abandoned their belongings and kept only the cart, wondering if there is something important inside it. He quickly turns to the magician next to him and gives the order. Without hesitation, the magician conjures up a fireball and launches it toward the cart. Sage turns around in alarm, realizing the direction of the attack, and rushes forward, cutting the fireball in half with a blow and redirecting the attack. However, the impact causes the cart to shake violently, throwing those inside out. The hero quickly notices this and runs to the person, catching them just in time. He smiles and asks the person if they are okay and if they are injured. Sig begins to notice the person's ears with precious jewelry and the scent of perfume until the person removes their hood, and he is surprised to see that it is an elf. She feels ashamed of revealing herself, but thanks the hero and calls him a hero. He watches her and speculates that she may be a noble from Carbon, but quickly asks her not to be too formal because he was only doing his duty. He then imagines that she was hiding her identity to avoid being a target. The followers soon notice the elf and say that if they sell her, they will make a fortune. Sig begins to sweat nervously because he is worried. He has exhausted his mana due to the successive use of skills and techniques, which has drained his body, and he knows that he cannot use a cursed sword because of the elf. Realizing he has no choice, he rushes away, fleeing from the followers. They are enraged and yell at the hero to stop immediately. But soon, the hero feels a powerful force where the followers were and turns to see that Car has easily defeated them. Car then asks the hero how a warrior of death cannot handle this and simply turns his back on the fight, adding that he may have overestimated the hero. At that moment, the old man accompanies the dwarf to her carriage, but she turns around, looks at the hero, blushing, and thanks him again. He takes a deep breath and explains to her that there is no need to thank him. As he explained earlier, he was only doing his duty. However, he hears someone calling him and turns around. It is Minerva and Sui asking if he is okay. He replies that he is fine and asks if they are okay. They reply that they are fine thanks to the little cat that protected them. Minerva explains to the hero that the tiger took care of the followers who tried to attack her. He is happy and confirms that he has made sure everyone is safe, then asks them to get ready because they will continue the journey immediately. He says this, and everyone is happy as they head towards Torajan. After traveling for some time, Minerva and Sui become excited because they have finally arrived. Seg explains to them that he understands their enthusiasm, but asks them to act calmly, remain quiet, and not act recklessly, reminding them that most of the carbon race is hostile to humans. However, before he can finish explaining, Minerva runs off like a madwoman, leaving the hero angry. She immediately approaches someone and asks him to look at him because he is really huge. Then, she stops at a cat-like creature, saying that it is very small, admiring its shiny fur, and shortly thereafter hugging it, claiming that it was even more wonderful than a cat's tail. However, the creature stares at her and asks Minerva who she thinks she is, because it does not interfere with humans. Minerva asks the creature if it wants to be her servant, warning that otherwise, it will have problems with the Death Warrior hero, and will not sleep peacefully at night. This creature, a werewolf, becomes angry and asks who this damn Death Hero Island. Minerva is shocked. The hero steps in and explains to her that the title of the Hero of Destruction is a symbol of fear, limited to the kingdom of Amelia, and has no meaning here. The werewolf turns around and says that such a title is too grand for a mere human, and tells her to stop babbling and get out of his way. However, he bumps into Sui and knocks her down. The hero immediately catches her and asks if she is okay. She thanks him and says she is fine, but the hero stands up, catches the wolf man's attention, and comments that he understands that the races here do not like humans. He barely finishes his sentence before kicking the wolf man, who manages to defend himself. But the hero finishes his thought, saying that they can't just walk around and touch people without their permission. The wolf man gets angry, calling the hero a despicable human, growling and preparing his claws, saying that it's always humans like the hero who touch and provoke them first, and yelling that they even took his children. Sage, exuding an incredible aura, says he doesn't know what the wolf man is talking about and explains that from the moment he draws his weapon, it won't be just a fight, but a battle. The wolf man is disturbed, looking at the hero with concern, wondering how he could emit such an aura. But the wolf man is not afraid, and he lunges at the hero with his claws. The hero does not hesitate and lunges as well, and a fierce battle begins. However, before their attacks collide, an evil force appears between them, pushing them away. They see a shadow rising. Jenin asks the two to stop because there is a clear misunderstanding between them. Seg imagines that it must be the dwarf with Kar. The wolf, angry, asks Jenin why he is protecting humans. The dwarf points to the group of heroes and explains that the people there have been thoroughly verified. He asks the wolf if he can consider them his invited friends and move forward. The wolf walks away angrily, as does the hero, who watches the wolf leave while warning them not to mess around in carbon, because the moment they let their guard down, countless fangs will destroy them. The hero notes that this seems like a very harsh and violent greeting. The dwarf laughs and tells him not to worry about it, introducing himself as Jenin, leader of the Stone Guild and companion of the Hero of Justice. He then explains that human trafficking is very active these days, which is why everyone is so tense. He pats the hero on the back and comments that humans are very prominent in Torian, where they don't seem to be well liked and need a local guide. After that, Jenin begins to recall the conversation he had with Kar, where Kar explained the events to him. Jenin quickly becomes concerned and asks if the Death Warrior really uses a demon sword. Kar answers yes and asks Jenin to keep an eye on the hero while he is in carbon. The girl starts laughing at this point, telling her boss that even he would go mad if he dared to use one of the demon swords. Kar simply replies no, because his eyes cannot be deceived. When he recalls the moment the hero used Zoe's ability, he was certain that it was the work of a demon sword and could not understand how the hero was able to use it and still remain sane. Jenin explains that although the hero can use the demonic sword, there are differences in how the sword completely controls individuals. Kar explains that the moment the hero falls under the control of the cursed sword, he will subdue him. Although this would be unfortunate and shameful for justice, there would be no other alternative. He says this and leaves, indicating that he will investigate the cursed sword further with Ibrid. He also asks Jenin to watch over them as the guardian of the Hero of Justice until the time comes. After recalling the conversation, the dwarf tells the group of heroes that it was fate that brought them together in this way and asks the hero if they would like to stay at his house to save on expenses. Manhwa immediately likes the idea, laughing and saying that the noble Jenin knows how to treat guests. Zoe, as usual, is concerned and asks if there are any problems. However, the hero refuses, saying that he does not like to be a burden and, because he is cautious, he cannot accept such generosity and kindness in a hurry. Manhwa gets angry and wants to know why they can't go to the dwarf's house, explaining that she doesn't want to stay in a cheap hotel again. So, she approaches the hero and says she understands him, but looking at the little tigers, she points out that they all need a good bath. Sage feels trapped and, without many options, takes a deep breath and tells Jenin that he will accept his invitation, but makes it clear that they will only stay for one day. The dwarf starts laughing, saying that they have made a good choice. The hero turns to Sui and asks if she is hurt because if she is, someone can carry her. She laughs and says she is fine and can walk on her own. Meanwhile, Manhwa plans her next prank because she does not want to walk, and fears that if she speaks up, the hero will make her carry the tiger, which will stain her clothes with fur. Then she has an idea. As they walk, the hero thanks Ganondorf for his hospitality and asks if he has a drainage system in his house. Ganondorf asks the hero what he thinks of the dwarves, since they even have hot water bubbles. But then, they hear a noise and immediately turn to see what it was, realizing that it was Manhwa on the ground, claiming that she had also fallen and wanted someone to be her servant and carry her. But they just look at her without saying anything and continue walking toward the dwarf's house without paying attention to her. Seg explains the reason for his previous question, saying it was to wash his cats. Jenin asks the hero if he means Siberian tigers and adds that if he could bring one to his house, it would be the greatest honor. At that moment, Manhwa jumps up, bites the hero's head, mad with rage at being ignored, and demands to be carried. He starts yelling, saying she talks too much and begging her to stop acting like a child. They continue walking, and Seg turns around, asking Sui to stop laughing and help him. Jenin falls behind, and the hero notices, asking the dwarf if he is coming. Jenin simply says he will be there soon. However, he becomes anxious, imagining that if the hero really is a user of a demon sword, it would be like bringing a time bomb into his home, and he fears that the Death Warrior may be a more dangerous man than they thought. He also remembers that he forgot to mention to Kar that there is another way for someone to use the demon sword without going mad. Then he wonders if Sig is a demon. After that, Jenin begins to guide them through the city to take them to his house. They finally arrive at an underground location that leaves Sui and Minerva surprised by the setup. They quickly begin descending the stairs, going deeper and deeper underground. Sig comments that he heard the dwarf was the leader of the Yansak Guild and asks if he really is the leader. Jenin explains that it is more of an honorary position and that he is just a normal dwarf. He says this and then opens the door, immediately surprising the hero, who finds himself witnessing the Yansak Guild area. Curious, Sig wants to know if all dwarves live there underground, but Jenin bursts out laughing, explaining that this is a tradition passed down since ancient times, and that he does not know exactly how many caves there are. After walking a little through the city, they stop in front of a house, and the dwarf calls out to his wife and daughter, announcing that he has arrived. Shortly after, they enter and a cheerful girl comments that Jenin has worked hard this time. Sig looks at the dwarf and notices that his daughter is very beautiful. However, Jenin blushes and explains that she is not his daughter, but his wife. Hearing this leaves the hero confused and doubtful, but she then goes to Jenin and hugs him. He immediately asks the hero if this is the first time he has seen a dwarf, explaining that from a human perspective, she may seem small, but for a dwarf, she is undoubtedly an adult. At that moment, a shy little girl standing behind her mother wants to know who the people her father has brought are. Jenin quickly shouts at his daughter, surprising her with his sudden outburst. But he picks her up excitedly and introduces her to the hero, saying that she is the most beautiful little girl in the world and asking if he would like a hug from her. He then puts her down and asks everyone what they think of her. She shyly says hello to everyone and says she is happy to meet them. Minerva and Sue squat down and also say they are happy to meet her. At that moment, Jenin hears something that catches his attention. Shortly after, he realizes it is the alarm. Embarrassed, he apologizes to everyone for forgetting his manners and keeping the guests waiting, then asks them to follow him so he can show them the room they will be using. Upon arrival, Jenin opens the door and explains to the hero that they will be using that room and can feel at home. Minerva and the cats, excited, waste no time and rush into the room. She remarks that she couldn't believe there was a real bed there. Sig thanks the dwarf and says they will stay there quietly, but Jenin tells him not to worry because they should consider it their own home. After the dwarf leaves, Suvi feels curious, wondering if all this will cause problems in the future. Sig sighs and asks Minerva not to get too attached to the place, as they will only be staying for one night, and to be careful with the things inside. However, while the hero is talking to her, Minerva and her cats cause a big mess. Shortly after, Sig approaches her and lightly hits her on the head because he has barely finished explaining and she is already causing trouble. She gets angry and calls the hero a fraud, then orders Diablo, Mammon, and Ishtar to attack the hero immediately. They pounce on Seg with all their might, and Minerva celebrates, asking the hero if he saw the power she has over the cats. Sig can't believe how fast the cats are growing, but he really wants to know why Minerva chose those names. He then explains that Diablo and Mammon are the names of demons and Ishtar is the name of a king. He explains to Minerva that if she is going to name the cats, she should at least do so consciously. Minerva smiles and says that this is exactly what she wanted. She looks at the kittens and asks if she was right to name them that way. He explains that even if they said it was okay, it would all be a very sad lie. Minerva, feeling embarrassed, remarks that the body in question is completely worthless, but she quickly becomes lost in thought. And when she turns around, she explains that this body is not weak. Everyone watches her silently without saying a word. Seg takes a deep breath and suggests that they take a break. Meanwhile, in the living room, Jenin is enjoying his time with his family, and his wife, elated, notes that they will finally have peace. The little girl remembers that humans are a very noisy species and asks if she can go take a look. But her mother says no and asks her to let them rest. Jenin asks his wife if the demon detector they hung there might be broken. She thinks for a moment and asks if he means the device that emits lights and warning sounds when demons approach, because if so, it should be working since he repaired it before leaving on his last mission. Then, he becomes serious as he thinks that perhaps the hero is not actually a demon. His wife notices her husband's distress and asks him if he is okay, and if something has happened in the human world. He immediately remembers what Carr did and recalls witnessing many brutal scenes, which is why he believes he can no longer trust humans. She explains that even before Carbon was founded, dwarves interacted with humans as an empowered race, which is necessary from the perspective of the entire dwarf community. Jenin watches his daughter and asks if family might be more important than work, then asks to stay by Alice's side from that moment on. At that moment, Alice runs away, and Jenin asks her where she is going, since it is already late, telling her to go to her room to rest. However, as she wanders around the area, she thinks about how she would like to talk a little with the human guests, but she does not know how to approach them. Alice looks around, seemingly lost, then chooses a direction and runs away. imagining that she can chat with humans about some of the night's adventures. She stops at a pile of boxes and starts looking for something to give to the humans, but she can't find anything nice to offer as a gift. She doesn't realize she's being watched, and soon, she hears a noise. She turns around quickly and remarks that the sound scared her, but it was probably just a mouse. However, she doesn't notice an evil presence right behind her. She mutters that since she has nothing wonderful to offer, she will return to her room. However, the mysterious figure surprises her, causing her to scream loudly. Jenin is worried and calls out his daughter's name, desperate to know where she island. Until he hears her voice calling him, he turns around, frightened, and when he sees her, he immediately hugs her, asks where she was, and then tells her that she is his most precious treasure and that from that moment on, he will never leave her alone again. At that moment, someone puts a hand on the dwarf's shoulder. It is the hero, who exudes a terrifying aura, asking Jenin if he is neglecting his daughter to watch him. The dwarf is terrified by the question, and begins to remember the things he has seen and done. He then laments that everything he did was only for the safety of his family, until he hears someone shouting his name and wakes up feeling dazed and confused. He quickly realizes that he was only having nightmares because he was drinking heavily to try to forget what happened. He looks at the hero and apologizes, explaining that he had to drink to avoid remembering his daughter, saying that she disappeared over a week ago without a trace. He and his wife searched all over Tori, and even his fellow dwarves and the hero's crew joined in the search, but unfortunately, they couldn't find any clues. He then adds that it seems as if his daughter has vanished into thin air. However, he returns to drinking. After slamming his glass hard on the table, Sig takes a deep breath and asks Jenon to stop, telling him that he is already drunk. The dwarf explains that given the circumstances he finds himself in, he has no choice but to rely on the power of a certain person. Sig is confused and asks if there really is someone capable of resolving the situation. Jenon explains that in Carbon, only one person can do so and no one else, the ancient king, Demetri. He then explains that the king has overcome countless challenges in the country with his 300 years of accumulated experience and wisdom. Upon hearing this, Sig imagines that the king of the gnomes must be an exceptionally talented individual unlike any other warrior. Jenon then thanks Sig for his help in searching for his daughter, but Sig replies that losing a family member is complicated and difficult for anyone. The dwarf remarks to the hero that he may have already realized that the reason he was summoned there was to be watched. Seg, looking at the alarm clock, comments that he noticed it as soon as he entered and mentions that he has encountered such alarm clocks before. Jenon, feeling embarrassed, admits that he is not ashamed of what he did, explaining that he had doubts about the hero, believing that he might be the bearer of the dark or cursed sword, or perhaps even a demon because he had heard testimony from the hero of justice. At this moment, Sig places his hand on his sword and asks what he means by testimony. Jenon points to the hero and asks him not to misunderstand, explaining that he had put his suspicions aside because he had been watching him since his arrival in Carbon to gather evidence. He then asks if all he has is the dragon sword, pointing out that it is the sword of Aaron Greenville, the dragon slayer, and is said to be a cursed sword, a sword with which even the great Carney Bly faced moments of failure. He adds that he has heard that spiritual creatures never follow evil beings. Sage, hearing all this, wants to know if all the misunderstandings about him have been cleared up once and for all. Jenon explains to the hero that his concern was whether he posed any threat to the safety of his family, but even so, he knows that he has been working hard for a week to find his daughter Alice. Saying this, he hands a letter to Sig, who takes it and immediately asks what it is about. Jenon explains that it is a letter of authorization, allowing him to participate in the meetings of the High Council of Carbon as a representative. He then mentions that since the hero is there to return the saber-toothed tiger to Sigmar, announcing his presence to his majesty will not only help the cause, but also aid in future missions. Sig, intrigued by all this, asks the dwarf if he mentioned that he was just an ordinary man there. Genion smiles and says he is just an ordinary father concerned for his daughter's safety, but then he becomes serious, asks the hero to listen carefully to his request, and asks him to observe proper etiquette in front of his majesty. Sig turns around and bids farewell to Genion, explaining that he will do things the right way. Next, at the royal castle in Torian, the trunk of the world tree, the hero and his party are amazed by the place. When they pass through the door, they find themselves in front of the entire council. Quickly, the werewolf tells them that several children were kidnapped last week. The dwarf explains that among the kidnapped was the daughter of the head of the Stone Guild. Meanwhile, the snake-faced girl comments that recklessly deploying soldiers will only increase the citizens' anxiety. The woman next to her emphasizes the need to start the investigation soon, but with a small team to avoid attracting attention. The King of Jin continues to write down all the information reported by the council, then closes his notebook, announcing that they must first resolve another matter. This is King Carbon, the ancient King Dimitri Greenfield. He quickly asks everyone to first listen to what the human hero has to say. Sig steps forward and requests an investigation into the disappearance of Alice, the daughter of Genin, the head of the Stone Guild. Upon hearing this, the king's expression changes, and he comments that this matter concerns Genin, and he wants to know what the hero is seeking there. Quickly, Sig looks at the tiger and explains that he wants to return it to its homeland, and thus requests that the entrance to Sigmar be opened. The king, watching the tiger's painting, replies that he will not allow it, pointing out that this situation was caused by humans. At that moment, Manhwa and Sui are stunned by the king's response, and Manhwa notes that the dwarf said the problem would be easily solved once the hero mentioned his name to the king. Zoe, on the other hand, is desperate to know the reason, pointing out that even cats like Diablo, Mammon, and Ishtar deserve to be happy in their homeland. The king explains that if he allows this exception, everything will descend into chaos. He then explains to Sui that Sigmar is the sacred land that their ancestors defended with their lives, and therefore, it is not a place that can be easily opened for the sake of a mere pet. Sig is not impressed by the explanation at all and approaches the genie, asking him what he should do then. Dimitri, confused, asks the hero to repeat what he just said. Sig explains that he has no knowledge of future events that may or may not happen. Even if the genie is the king of that place, he has no right to prevent someone from returning to their homeland, and asks if the Holy Kingdom of Carbon still maintains a system of slavery. Everyone is shocked by the question, including the king, who is deeply disturbed by this insolence. He then explains that the Warrior of Death has uttered words that should never be spoken in Carbon, and orders the huge man to deal with the hero. At that moment, the huge man calls out to the hero, exerting overwhelming spiritual pressure, ready to attack, and explains that he is extremely rude, delivering a powerful blow, the impact of which causes a huge explosion. As soon as the dust clears a little, he is surprised to realize that the hero has managed to dodge the attack. At that moment, a girl with white hair screams, asking the huge man to quickly look up, where he will strike directly above his head, ready to strike. With that, the hero strikes the huge man in the face and quickly takes his position again. While the huge man becomes pensive, angry, he turns around and asks the hero how he dared to cut his face. Sig remains silent, and the two charge at each other with all their might. Just as their weapons are about to collide, they hear a female voice commanding them to stop immediately. Everyone is surprised and bows to the princess. The huge man remarks that he stopped the attack at her request and is ready for any further orders. Sig can't believe who she island. He notices that she is the fairy, and that she was so excited that she couldn't properly greet her savior, and introduces herself as Nias Greenfield. She then greets her father, who is delighted to see her again, welcomes her, and asks if there was any trouble on the way. She replies that there wasn't, but remembers that she has something to say and asks if she can speak. He gives her permission. Nia recalls that, first and foremost, what Sig said is not entirely wrong. The sword-toothed tigers want to return to their homeland. Dimitri thinks about what his daughter has just said, and she, noticing her father's concern, asks him if he would like to hear her thoughts. Mia explains that there are currently kidnappings and disappearances occurring in the kingdom of Torin, and that the methods used are so frightening and sophisticated that they are difficult to track. She looks at the hero and assures her father that Sig is a hero who has solved difficult problems in the human world. She then asks her father to trust him, reminding him that if he solves these problems, the kingdom will benefit greatly, and in return, they can grant him a favor as a reward. Dimitri listens and thinks, but quickly turns away and says he is not sure if this is a good idea. However, after thinking about it, he tells Nia that she will be in charge of the matter. She is happy, and the hero breathes a sigh of relief. She approaches Sig and says that she is repaying him for the day he saved her. At that moment, the hero smiles and thanks everyone there for their trust, reminding the princess that he imagined she was a high-ranking member of Carbonite, but he never would have guessed that she was the princess. Nia apologizes for having to hide her identity and explains that the hero knows how to treat humans and that her people in Carbonite will one day live freely with humans. She feels ashamed and remarks that she wishes there were more people like the hero. He blushes and doesn't know what to say. Then, she takes a deep breath, looks at everyone in the council, and reminds them that, as her father said, she will take control of the situation with confidence. Nia explains to everyone that she will guarantee the hero's safety and actions in Carbon from that moment on. Quickly, the white-haired girl asks the princess if she isn't giving too many privileges to just a human. Nia explains that it is natural to grant such things to someone who risked his life to save another. Furthermore, she asks everyone to look at the sword the hero is carrying. After they all notice the sword, they are surprised when they realize it is the red dragon sword. Nia confirms that it is indeed Arinth's sword and asks if someone carrying the hero's sword should not be treated as a guest of the state. Everyone becomes elated, while the hero feels confused about why the atmosphere has suddenly changed. Nia asks Seg if he feels embarrassed because she mentioned Arinth's name, and he admits that he does a little. She explains that to humans, Arinth is just a simple dragon slayer, but to the people of Carbon, she is much more than just a hero. She recounts that in the past, dragons invaded the kingdom of Carbon, targeting a rare and indigenous species called golden wood. Arinth was the savior who fought dozens of dragons. With her power, all the citizens of Carbon grew up, worshipping her name. In the end, the golden wood became extinct, but Arinth's legacy lives on to this day. Nia assures the hero that the roof of Sigmaer means protecting everything that was a continuation of Arinth's will. She extends her hand to the hero and reminds him that if he helps eliminate the criminal organization threatening the kingdom of Carbon, she can ask her father to open the Sigmar Gate. Sig sighs and says that he is not there to solve this problem, explaining that he came to ask for her help with his own case. She listens and asks if he has not already solved the murder case that turned the country upside down. Nia notes that she witnessed the scene when she secretly visited the kingdom of Amelia, shocked as people gathered and cheered, all made possible by the hero who eradicated corruption in an entire country after the murder case. She laughs, saying she was there. Witnessing that amazing moment, she approaches the hero again and says that he is an expert at understanding people, and that just as he revolutionized Amelia, Carbon will also need his strength. Sage begins to think about John's family and what the dwarf said. He takes a deep breath and comments that the service will double. She is confused and asks what he means. He smiles and says he will accept the mission. She quickly grabs his hand, happy, and thanks him for that. Meanwhile, Manhwa, watching them talk, cannot believe that the hero has been so easily persuaded by the princess and asks Saba if she doesn't think the princess is very good at talking. Sua agrees with Manhwa, but inside she thinks, watching the two closely and wishing it were her holding the hero's hand. Like the princess, Nia asks Sig not to worry about convincing the king after solving the case, assuring him that if it is her request, he will fulfill even the smallest things. He asks her not to get her hopes up, explaining that he is not a professional detective. She smiles and says that's fine because she trusts him completely, explaining that he is the only one who can protect and maintain peace in that place. After that, they head to the records room in Carbon, where Fiona, the leader of the Harpy clan, informs them that she will first report on the status of the investigation. She explains that the organization is called the Squad and that they are responsible for the numerous kidnappings currently taking place in Carbon. She mentions that there is a central leadership, but the rest are organizations organized as a human network, mainly involved in kidnapping and human trafficking within the lower ranks. Sage takes a deep breath and asks if that is all she has to report. Fiona admits, feeling ashamed, that unfortunately, the information she has just provided is all they have discovered so far. The hero curiously asks if this is really all he needs to know about the disappearances and kidnappings that have been happening for years. He wants to know how the investigation has been conducted up until now, and he too. Fiona sheepishly explains that they were only arresting those who showed up, and that most of the lower-ranking members had been caught. Seg bluntly states that this means nothing, because unless they arrest the central leadership, the network will continue to pop up endlessly. The hero realizes, deep down, that the situation is much worse than he initially thought. Fiona explains that they have been in a closed country for hundreds of years, so they are not prepared to deal with some external matters. As a result, it was inevitable that they would fall victim to such crimes one after another. Watching the leader of the Harpy tribe, the hero imagines that they faced many difficulties, but they were only chasing human traffickers. At this point, the hero sighs deeply, notices Minerva and Sue under Fiona's wings, and asks them to come out. They simply reply that it is very comfortable and warm there. Fiona watches the two girls happily, feeling embarrassed. However, Seg comments as he looks at them that there is an effective way to eliminate these bastards. He says this and places his hands on their heads. With a suspicious smile, he says it will involve the use of bait. After that, the hero disguises himself in a bar. A man approaches and asks if he can sit there. Sig replies that he can do whatever he wants. After sitting down, the man smiles and remarks that he is smaller than the rumors suggested, addressing him as the killer Mark Plant. Seg, disguised as Mark Plant, says that when the will breaks, the body breaks too, and that he ended up there after losing his subordinates, his honor, and everything else. The long-haired man begins pouring a drink for the protagonist, agreeing that most people who end up in that neutral zone are like him. After filling the glass, he places a wolf emblem under it and pushes it toward the protagonist. With a smile, he asks if Sig, disguised as Mark Plant, is interested in working with them. After that, they head to a crowded area where different races roam. The man with the tied-back hair asks the protagonist to take a good look at the girl in front of him, with cat ears. He says that the hero's mission is to capture her and bring her to them. The hero remarks that it doesn't seem difficult, but the man warns Sig to be careful because his boss is watching that girl closely, and no harm must come to her. The hero asks if the girl is special. The long-haired man confirms that she is indeed a non-human girl who could fetch a very high price, because if such a child existed, she would have attracted attention long before, but she appeared suddenly out of nowhere. The man bids farewell to the hero, mentioning that in any case, he will entrust him with this task, once again urging him not to harm her. The disguised hero remains deep in thought. Meanwhile, Minerva, also in disguise, happily hums a tune as she begins to walk, but she stumbles and quickly falls on her face. She gets up and begins to complain of pain. At that moment, the hero appears in front of her, and she looks at him with disdain as he approaches. After that, the disguised Seg and Minerva, also disguised inside a bag, follow the man with tied hair, who comments that the hero did an excellent job, even though he became trash. His experiment has not been in vain. Sig replies that he is exaggerating, but the man says that the girl they caught is a high-quality product, and the leader will choose her personally. With a smile, the man catches the hero's attention, addressing him as Mark Blunter, and says this is a great opportunity for him to make a good impression. The disguised hero asks, surprised, what he means by that. The man turns and asks why the hero is so nervous. Sage, confused, pretends he is not nervous. When they arrive at their destination, just before opening the door, the man advises the hero that someone like him should not be so afraid because he will witness even more exciting things from now on. Upon entering, the hero notices several guard dogs and feels curious about the place. The man with the tied back hair explains that they plan to set up a hideout in the abandoned dwarf cave, and that this is not all. Observing the guards, the hero quickly wants to know what they are, and the man replies that they are also non-human species. The hero remarks that he thought they valued their race highly. However, the man explains that although they may pretend otherwise, in the end, they are just like any other humans. When hungry, love for their comrades and friendship come second. He then adds, as my leader always says, in the end, it's all about money. After walking a little further, they finally arrive at the leader's room. The leader immediately addresses the hero as Mark Blunter, praising him as a valuable asset to their team, especially for delivering such a high-quality product. This time, curious, he wonders if the man in front of him is really the leader. The leader mentions that they will first take a good look at the product he has brought. As soon as the hero reveals the disguised Minerva, the leader rejoices at her type and comments that she is the perfect product he has been looking for. He laments that it would be a waste to sell her and would rather have her by his side. He approaches Minerva in disguise and asks her if she would like to become his pet. However, she tells him to back off. The leader is confused, not expecting her to speak, but Minerva quickly realizes what is happening and begins to meow, pretending to be a cat girl. However, the commander soon sees through the ruse and, enraged, demands to know what is going on, realizing that she is not a monster girl with cat ears, but just a human wearing fake ears. He does not notice the hero behind him, ready to strike, but it is too late. The hero takes out the commander. Quickly, the long-haired man screams in terror to the guards. However, the hero takes a deep breath and, using Sue's power, freezes the entire area, trapping the man. In a state of panic, the man screams, demanding to know what all this ice is and what the hero is doing. At that moment, the hero removes his disguise as Mark Blunter and asks the man if he hasn't figured it out yet. He grabs Sue in his hand and reveals that he is a warrior of death. After restraining the prisoners, the commander, drenched in sweat, admits that the hero has easily tricked them. Seg hears this and asks if he wants his mouth tied too. He then turns to Minerva and compliments her on being good bait, saying she played her part well. However, she only trembles with rage and quickly explodes in anger, claiming that the hero forced her to do it. Sua, confused, asks the hero why he disguised himself as Mark Blunter, and he replies that it was easy because the real one is bald. Seg surveys the area and estimates that there is nothing of value worth taking. He turns to the bound men and quickly demands that they reveal everything about the location of the kidnapped demihumans and the scattered troops. The commander shouts that if the hero releases him first, he will reveal everything. The hero then removes the gag from the commander's mouth and makes it clear that if he moves, he will kill him immediately. The commander says he recognizes the hero, describing him as the warrior who condemned Arsene Barthanon, but quickly shouts, asking if the hero really thinks he will reveal everything with mere threats, claiming that he knows his rights, and that in a fair trial, he will simply talk about the country. However, before he can finish his rant, the hero delivers a powerful punch to his jaw, causing him to spit blood. Then he grabs him by the collar and, with a threatening look, demands answers. With broken teeth, the commander reveals that the hero must go down to the basement of the building. In the far right corner of the warehouse, there is a secret door where 20 mercenaries are stationed with their leader. He adds that the key is on his belt. The hero releases him and thanks him. He then tells Sig that he will be back soon and instructs her to immediately go to his side if anything urgent happens. Zoe anxiously asks how he plans to do that without the red dragon sword. At that moment, they hear Minerva comment that it is finally time for the hero to use it. They quickly turn to see Minerva surrounded by a powerful aura, announcing that she has been waiting for this day. Zoe tries to join them but faces Minerva's anger, who tells her to stay away. However, Sig smiles and says there is no need for that, because his fists alone will be enough. Meanwhile, in the basement where the prisoners are being held, the mercenary leader gets angry and complains about the noise the children are making. At that moment, Jenin's daughter cries out for her parents. The mercenary leader bangs on the cell door and orders her to stop crying because she is disturbing him. She tries to stop, stifling her sobs, and then hears someone ask if she is a dwarf child. She turns around and sees a huge ogre imprisoned next to her, looking confused. The ogre, looking at her, comments that while dwarves are small and strong, they are a tribe of warriors because patience is the virtue of a true warrior, and even dwarves can endure with flexibility. She smiles and thanks the ogre for his words. Meanwhile, the mercenary leader laughs and asks the blonde young man if he noticed how he caught the girl's attention, saying that it looks like they are in a zoo. The blonde explains that even the animals there can talk, then wonders aloud why no one has come to change the shifts yet, as it is almost time. But soon, they hear one of the mercenaries shout that they have a problem because there is an intruder. They immediately turn around and the blonde asks angrily, who dares to interfere? Could it be harpies or gnomes? The masked man replies, no, it's just a lone human. The blonde man angrily demands to be taken to the intruder, claiming he will deal with him in the blink of an eye. However, the masked man is actually the hero, who remarks that there is no need for guidance because he is already there. With that, one of the mercenaries falls skillfully. The blonde man realizes angrily that he is the warrior of condemnation. The hero smiles, remarking that it has been a long time since their last meeting, and that he is surprised that the blonde man is still alive. The blonde man replies that because of bastards like the hero and the warrior of justice, he has lost his subordinates, his reputation, and everything else. He then stomps his foot on the ground, releasing a burst of power, introducing himself as Toradin and declaring that his subordinates' revenge will be fulfilled right there and then. The hero is curious about the blonde man's fighting style, wondering if he is a boxer, but Toradin quickly shouts that if the hero is a real man, he should face him with his bare hands. However, Sig draws his sword and apologizes, commenting that unfortunately, he is not a boxer. The blonde man lunges at him with all his might, throwing a punch and yelling at the hero to die already. Sig easily dodges and then uses his vision break skill, landing a powerful blow against the blonde man. After that, Sig returns his sword to its sheath, while the blonde man's blood splatters everywhere. The hero takes the keys he was carrying and says he will accept that as payment. Then he opens the door and, looking at the cell, realizes that the blonde man has captured many. Suddenly, he hears someone calling out and quickly realizes it is Alice, the dwarf Jenin's daughter. He asks her to wait a moment, promising to free her quickly. But shortly after, he hears the mercenaries shouting that there is an intruder. Sig becomes anxious, realizing he has been discovered. Two men appear, ordering the hero to be arrested. However, a ghoul suddenly appears and delivers a powerful blow to one of them. The ghoul turns around and assures the hero that he will help him. Sig smiles and asks the ghoul's name, to which he replies, Helen. The hero draws his sword and says, pleased to meet you. He then asks if the ghoul is ready to throw some punches. After that, the hero leads the freed prisoners to Fiona and explains that the steps to dismantle a criminal gang are as follows. Sig explains that first, the leader who forms the core of the organization must be overthrown. Then, taking advantage of the resulting chaos, the middlemen are eliminated. Finally, it becomes a matter of simply sweeping them away like garbage. At that moment, one of the mercenaries thought he had escaped, but he was quickly terrified when a huge hammer fell to the ground right in front of him. It was Jenin, who was angry and demanding to know where his daughter was. Then he heard his daughter calling him and finally calmed down when he saw her safe in the hero's arms. Jenin ran quickly towards his daughter, overjoyed that she was unharmed. As he hugged her, he began to cry, apologizing and promising never to leave her again. Minerva and Zoe were moved by the scene, as it was truly touching. After that, all the different races came together to help with the mission, which led to the complete eradication of the human trafficking ring. With that, Seg informs the king that, as promised, he has dismantled the human trafficking group. He adds that the leader, known only as the boss, has a completely unknown real name and past. However, the hero explains that he has captured the man as the king requested. Dimitri mentions that he will proceed with the trial according to the laws of Carbon. The different races begin to observe the hero, whispering in disbelief about how the king treated him, and surprised that he completed the task so easily. However, they all remember that since he is human, they must remain cautious about trusting him completely. Fiona notes that despite destroying the group, they were not treated as they deserved, and from what she saw, the hero may indeed be trustworthy. Grateful for saving his daughter, Jenon vows to do anything to repay the favor. At that moment, King Dimitri addresses the group's leader, commenting that he seems to be solely responsible for all these incidents. In desperation, the old man begs the king to wait a moment and admits that he is well aware of the damage he has caused to the city of Carbon, and that he deeply regrets it. He then asks if the king is not even a little curious about how he managed to lead such a large organization without being caught. He says this with an evil smile. Dimitri simply asks him to speak. The group's leader begins to reveal that some of Carbon's nobles were supporting him and that if their names were revealed, it would plunge the country into chaos. The king asks, curiously, if he is really referring to traitors among them who collaborated with criminals and sold out the people. The leader notices the king deep in thought and comments that if his majesty wishes, he can either remain silent or speak. The choice is entirely up to the king. Watching the old man, Seg realizes that, in part, he had always believed in this possibility. He looks at the king, curious to know what decision he will make. Dimitri declares that everyone who belongs to the city of Carbon is connected by a shared spirit, and that their ancestors, who fled the human world centuries ago, built Carbon where the world tree once fell. In a sinister tone, Dimitri explains, "We will find the traitor and root out the seed of evil." Everyone immediately becomes uncomfortable, whispering among themselves that this may be a ploy by the old man to sow discord between the races. The king then affirms that he has dreamed of a country where all races can stand united as equals. In a calm voice, he begins to draw his sword and asks the leader of the ensemble if he said he wanted a fair trial. At that moment, the old man begins to shout, trying to reveal the traitor of Carbon, who had made a deal with him, was. But before he can finish, the king of Carbon quickly beheads him. The old man's disbelief is evident as his blood splatters everywhere. After his body collapses to the ground, the king sheathes his sword and says, "Those who harm their own kind are executed. That is the highest law in Carbon." Sig breaks out in a cold sweat as he stares at the fallen body. Realizing that the king had fired an exceptionally accurate magic sword from a distance, he now believes that the king of the Jinn is indeed an unusually powerful person. Dimitri turns to the hero, commenting that he seems to have underestimated him. Sig kneels and humbly replies that it was just luck. But Dimitri objects, "If it were just luck, you wouldn't have dismantled the Ensemble group in a few days." The king of the Jinn now understands why Nias loved the hero so much. Without wasting any time, Seg asks the king if he will open the passage to Sigmar. The king of the Jinn replies that the priority is to deal with the remaining members of Ensemble and the traitors who collaborated with them. He then asks Sig to search for Nias because it was her mission, and therefore she should be the one to reward him. After that, Dimitri announces that the human trafficking case has been officially solved. Immediately, the gathered crowd begins chanting for King Dimitri Greenfield, wishing him a long life and honoring the hero, Sig. After leaving the king's hall, Sig heads to Princess Nias's chambers. When he reaches her door, he shouts that it is he, Sig, and asks if he may enter. Nias responds positively and opens the door. Nias says with a bright smile and a calm, warm aura that she has been waiting for him. Nias says that the hero has worked hard, thanks him, and asks him to sit down because she has prepared tea for the hero. He thanks the princess. As they drink tea, Nias comments that he suppressed the leadership, causing her to break down inside, and that she also heard that he infiltrated the group in disguise. Seg replies that this is true, and explains that he was working in a theater troupe. Once he knew what role he would play, the rest was not difficult, but he says that she knows that if it weren't for her, they would not have had the idea. She laughs and says, "Humans are truly amazing, which is why I have become more curious and want to know more." She gives him the promised task and says, "It's a pass to Sigmar signed by her father." As Sig goes to take it, she pulls the paper back and says, "There's something first." The hero is confused and asks her to be more specific. Nias says there is something else she wants to ask him first. Then he hears her ask if he can become the first human noble in Carbon. He finds it strange and asks why. She explains that they are still suffering and have problems interacting with humans. However, for the future of Carbon, they need to understand humans, why humans are so greedy and cruel. For that reason, she wants to know why they help strangers who are unrelated to them. After saying that, she puts her hands on the hero's hands and says she wants to know if they can coexist with these people. Then, regarding the hero, she can see that he is anxious and carries loneliness within him, and that he must have been wandering for a long time. But she thinks that this is not the life he wanted. She then explains that if he becomes a noble in Carbon, he will no longer have to fight and will not get involved in troublesome matters. With that, she wants to know if she said something rude. Sig takes a deep breath and replies, no. He admits that what she saw is correct and that she has great insight. She laughs and says that he will stay in Carbon from now on, and with his achievements, he will surely earn a title of loyalty like the Marquis. However, Sig pulls his hand away from hers, which surprises her. He stands up and says he refuses. She wants to know why, because it's an offer he has no reason to refuse. He smiles and says that someone is waiting for him to take care of them, and even though she's annoying at sometimes, it's something only he can do. So he takes the job. As he takes it, he says that the reward for the job is enough. However, he believes that if he had accepted the position, he would obviously end up handling all diplomacy with humans. Sig also points out that there is the matter of Sigmar, and he will take care of it. She shouts for him to wait a moment, grabs his hand, and says that if this is really what he wants, she won't force him to stay. Then she runs to hug him, which makes him a little embarrassed. She says shyly that she hopes he will accept this. Then she steps back. The hero sees a pin on his uniform and immediately wants to know what island. She says it is a pin carved from golden wood and asks him to give it to someone he loves. Sig remembers that golden wood comes from a golden tree whose roots grow in the ground, rich in mana and wealth. It is also a symbol of the royal, Carbon family, and dragons sought its mana increasing effects, leading to their extinction. At this point, it literally deserves to be called golden. Sig tells the princess that he accepted the mission only out of necessity, and believes it will be difficult to carry the item, and be attacked again. Naya says she knows it's a burden for him, but explains that she wants to pass on the blessings of Carbon in this way. For this reason, she wants to know if he can accept it just this once. The hero takes a deep breath and replies that it's okay, as long as she insists so much. But he thinks he'll have to keep it hidden. Maya thanks him and says she will wait for the day they meet again. After he leaves, she lowers her head and thinks that she wanted to know more about him. So she is startled when she hears someone talking about a plan to recreate a human hero in Carbon. She quickly realizes that he is her father and wants to know how long he has been here. While drinking tea, Dimitri explains that if a person of high reputation becomes a citizen of Carbon, he believes it will help future interactions with humans. He then quickly moves on to his daughter and explains that at first, it was about the hero of justice, but he emphasizes that now he has grown fond of the warrior of death. However, he stresses that since he has already rejected the offer, they will have to find a replacement. So, he asks about the radiant hero from the Sylvet family. She wants to know if her father has ever lost something he wanted, even once. After a while, the heroes group continues its journey. The sisters comment that it is finally happening. Sig says they have arrived and, looking at the huge gate, explains that it is the entrance to Sigmar. When the huge gate opens, the saber-toothed tiger begins to sniff and, when he smells a familiar scent, becomes very happy. Sig asks if he can also smell his hometown. The tiger and his cubs become excited as they return to their homeland, Sigmar, a remote, unexplored land sacred to the Carbon Empire, where the country protects and inhabits various rare species. The hero notices that the tiger has seen his hometown for the first time since he was born. He then teases him, saying that it took a long time, but now he hopes that the tiger will be fine and free from trouble. Sua comments that today seems very beautiful and peaceful. However, she notes that she always struggles with goodbyes and no matter how many times it happens, she never gets used to it. He agrees with her, but when he turns around and sees Minerva standing to the side, he asks if she isn't going to say goodbye. She says that for an animal, it must be an honor to have come this far with them. The tiger and Sui approach Minerva and ask if her sister will say goodbye to them. However, she says she doesn't care. But then she starts to remember fond memories with the tiger and the cubs and begins to cry. Then she jumps up and hugs the tiger, crying that she will miss her cats. Then she turns around and asks the hero if they can't just travel with them, and if the tigers can't adapt there, they will become food for other animals. Seg takes a deep breath, puts his hand on Minerva's head, and asks her not to worry because they will grow up healthy and always eat good food. Then he asks her to stop crying. Looking at the cubs, he asks if they won't feel at home there. Minerva takes a deep breath, points toward the gate, and gives her final command to the beasts. They must go and conquer Sigmar. And so, the tiger and her cubs begin to walk toward their home. After they pass through the gate, Minerva cries out that even if she destroys the world, she will save the place where they live. She cries again. She says that they will meet again someday. Sig reflects that humans, animals, monsters, and even black swords are all connected by hidden feelings of warmth. That is how everything lives. He too will wait for the day when they meet again. Until then, farewell. Minerva remains silent, but Sig puts his hand on her head again and says she has been very patient, and now they must return. She pulls at his clothes and asks him to lift her up and carry her on his back. Sig points out that she is just trying to use his back as a substitute for animals, but he ends up doing as she asks. Then he asks if she is happy now. At that moment, they hear Sui laughing out of nowhere and ask what is so funny. She says that both the hero and Minerva seem to have changed a little, as Sig used to draw a clear and strict line between them, and now he even comforts hurts her older sister. While Manhwa gets angry, the hero begins to wonder when this happened. He also wonders why he carries Manhwa in the first place. However, Sui tells Manhwa that she used to give him orders and now she has stopped doing so. Manhwa gets even more angry and tells her sister to be quiet because she can't sleep. Sui continues to laugh, but Sig explains that it's because he's spent so much time with them. As they return, he thinks that this can't be a bad change. After returning, Jenin wants to know if the hero has separated from the sword tiger. Sig says yes and explains that it was a long journey, but he won't apologize for what he's about to say. He just apologizes again for deceiving him. Sig says it's okay and adds that he didn't trust him from the beginning either, so there's no need to feel bad or apologize for the deception. Jinon says he thinks the hero must have lived a completely different life until now. The dwarf takes a book and asks the hero, if possible, to deliver it to his majesty. Sig takes the book and asks what island. Jinon says it is the band's transaction records and that he got it from Manhwa, who took it from their office. The hero is shocked by what he sees and calls out to the dwarf with a very serious expression. Looking at the logbook, he says that it seems this is not over yet. So after a while, he heads to the Great Hall of Carbon Castle and stands before King Dimitri, who immediately asks the hero to repeat what he just said. Sig, frightened, knows that no matter what they ask, the real culprit who betrayed the people through the band is responsible. He points his finger upward. He shouts that the culprit is the former king, Dimitri Greenfield. This leaves everyone in shock. All the beings around him begin to wonder what the Death Warrior is talking about, and whether the former king is really a human trafficker. Nervous about the accusation, the king says that the hero's joke has gone too far. He then asks if it wasn't enough for him to conspire with a criminal organization to also sell the people he claimed were like his children to traffickers. He insists that even though he solved the band incident, such remarks cannot simply be ignored. But Sig throws the logbook on the ground and asks, if there is evidence, what will he do? Then he remembers when he first saw the book and spotted the king's signature. He concludes that the handwriting of the person who dealt with the band was definitely the king's because he compared the signature in the logbook to the signature on the reward offered by the king's daughter. The creatures see the king's signature and are shocked. The snake woman says it is unbelievable and ridiculous. The king insists that signatures can be easily forged and wants to know if everyone there is really considering such a possibility. Sig says there is an important point. They caught the fugitive official from the troop to confirm this. He reveals that he caught someone and, with an evil look, asks if that person is ready to talk. The person trembles with fear and confesses everything, saying that the leader had an accomplice, and that this person was a genie wearing a hood, so he couldn't see the face clearly, but he is sure that they recorded the details of the transactions and routes in their own books. After hearing this, Sig says that it is certainly useful information. The man, still terrified, says he has already provided the information the hero wanted and begs for his life to be spared. But without any mercy, the hero does not hesitate and kills him, saying he did a good job. However, Sig says that the execution of the gang leader was not for the sake of Carbon's justice or anything like that. He explains that during the trial, when the leader tried to expose him, he ended up getting his head cut off. Seg then says that the book the king is carrying looks exactly like the one the squad official described. He suggests that if this is really proof that the king did not profit from selling people, then he should present the book. Dimitri finds himself cornered. He then says that he did it for the sake of the carbon cause. All the creatures there are shocked, unable to believe that the king did such a thing. The king throws the book on the ground and the hero says that he pretended to manage national affairs while manipulating production prices. Dimitri claims that resources were scarce, the national treasury was depleted, and that although the country was open, the gap compared to foreign countries built over years of oppression and long periods of isolation was too great to overcome. He feared that if things continued this way, Carbon would have no future. Then he grabs his sword and asks if the hero thinks he did these things to hurt people, that it was all a sacrifice for the greater good and there was no other way. Even after doing all this, he nervously insists that Carbon needs protection. Sig says that he is raving and falling into a trap, and that if betraying the people for the good of the nation is a sacrifice, then why wasn't there a single fairy among the non-human species captured by the squad? Thinking about it, there wasn't even a single fairy among the abducted creatures. So Sig draws his sword and explains that even if describing this as a sacrifice for the nation seems reasonable, the king never sacrificed anything of his own. With an evil look, he asks if the profit from betraying the people is commensurate with the idea of a greater cause. Dimitri becomes enraged and orders the executioner to immediately kill the hero, who threatens the unity of Carbon. The hero turns around and the huge creature approaches, unleashing its power, but instead of attacking him, it directs its powerful blow toward the king, surprising the hero. However, Dimitri easily blocks the attack. The big man is shocked to see his attack blocked and says that the king no longer represents them. Dmitri replies that he understands their intentions well. The giant tries to attack again, but the king uses his ability to become immaterial, rendering the blow useless. With a simple movement, he lands multiple blows on the creature. Dmitri says that they continue to show their foolishness until the end. Sig watches the creature being completely crushed, and without hesitation uses his secret technique, explosive steps. He rushes straight towards the king as their swords clash. Dmitri tells the hero that if he had become an obedient member of Carbon, this situation could have been avoided. Sig replies that every time he looks at trash like the king, unpleasant memories come to mind. Dmitri calls out to the hero and unleashes his incredible power. Sig becomes anxious, wondering what kind of mana he is feeling. The king declares that from now on, the hero is considered a threat to the kingdom of Carbon. The sword carried by the king is the Jin Stone, the sacred relic of the Jin, which has been passed down since ancient times. The gently glowing white blade and intricate guard design symbolize the pride of the Greenfield royal family, protectors of Carbon, and its value is immeasurable. Sig remembers that the Jin are a race born with extraordinary beauty and strength, hundreds of times greater than ordinary humans. Their abilities evolve greatly with each generation and are unmatched. Therefore, the hero is worried and must repel the king's attack as best he can. Knowing that his chances of victory are slim, the king retreats, and while the hero is still worried, he asks why the warrior of death did not condemn him. Sig prepares himself and, as he channels his power into his sword, he acknowledges that King is superior to him in every way, including experience and skill. He then activates his ability to see Sig and concludes that he must end the fight quickly. He then combines it with his other skill, Black Sky Flash, but he is surprised when he realizes that the king has disappeared, and soon hears the king say that he has heard that the hero has combat experience. While Sig fends off a surprise attack from behind, already realizing that he is an upside-down man from the top of the hall, the king comments that he doubts the hero has fought a genie before, and that he himself, who has lived through such simple experiences, wonders if the hero expected to live past 500 years. Sig begins to wonder if the king has concentrated his energy in his feet to stay on the ceiling. Midori asks the hero to allow him just once to show the fighting style of the Jin, which humans cannot imitate. With that, he unleashes a series of attacks. Sig turns and yells at Fiona to get everyone out of there immediately. Then he tries to defend himself as best he can against the countless attacks coming his way. The king doesn't stop and continues to attack the hero relentlessly. All the creatures begin to run, terrified by the chaotic scene unfolding around them. After resisting the attacks, Sig laughs and asks the king if hidden and surprise attacks are the way of the Jin, as he finds them incredibly treacherous. But the king appears behind him, saying that if all he wants is to destroy him, he can easily crush him like a simple twig. Sage turns to strike, but due to the king's intangible form, he fails. As Sage continues to try to land a single blow, the king says that he must personally crush him with his own hands in front of those who doubted him to prove the divine will of the Carbon Kingdom, and that the king's mission is to exhaust his nation. Saying this, he creates numerous copies of himself. The hero continues to try to defend himself from the countless attacks coming from all directions, while thinking that the blows rely on incredible speed, which usually makes the fighting style ineffective due to excessive mana consumption. However, he knows that Dmitri, who has stored mana for hundreds of years, overcomes all those disadvantages and remains unaffected. His body is bruised, but even so, the hero remains serious and asks if the king truly believes that selling citizens to protect the country represents the will of Carbon. He then activates his explosive step ability and charges toward the king with all his might. He grips his sword tightly and launches his attack. However, his blow completely fizzles out, and he is stunned. Unable to believe what is happening, the king approaches and says that it seems his desperate attempt has failed, and that his mana has run out at a crucial moment. But the king notices a wound on his face, and thinks that the transition between attack and defense was so surprisingly quick that it was actually dangerous. So he asks if the hero still dares to oppose the kingdom of Carbon and face the consequences with his life. Sage points his sword and asks if the country is truly precious to the king, because if it is, he believes the king should have sold himself instead of the people, his crown, his sword, even his precious daughter. Dmitri flies into a rage and calls the hero a bastard. Then he lunges with all his might, demanding to know how he dares to speak of Nayas. Sig prepares to block the attack, but as soon as he gets close, something startles him and he explodes from the collision, throwing him forcefully against the wall. But he believes it's not over yet. He quickly begins to remember the Steel Knight, Albert Frederick, saying that from that moment on, he would teach him the Frederick family's vision passed down through generations. He had agreed at the time, The old man laughed and pointed out that since the hero had inherited his son's will, his technique should also become his. Then he remembers his friend Sigmund, telling him that what he would pass on to him should help him because his mana was low due to the Sig family's hereditary disease. So he asked the hero to ignite his mana and accept the explosive power as it was, and that even with very little mana, it would be enough. Then he had to stimulate the latent abilities of the power against anger, thus triggering the forced activation of physical power. Seeing this, Dimitri comments that the hero is pathetic, playing the role of a fake hero, and asks if he has the slightest respect for his daughter, Nias. At that moment, under the rubble, the hero's hand begins to release a strange power. The king turns and explains to Sig that he could have prolonged his life, but instead chose to hasten his death with excessive actions. He says this and is shocked when he sees a fist right in front of his face. With that, the hero delivers a powerful punch to the king, knocking him hard to the ground. Dimitri begins to get up, angry, demanding to know how the hero was able to do that. As he unleashes his power, he asks Sig why the king is so surprised, then invites him to continue what they were doing before. This is the ability of Frederick, the Punisher. The king wants to know how the hero releases mana inside his body. If he still has the power to do so, then he is stunned when he realizes something. He remembers the moments before his attack. Just as he was about to strike, Sig began to direct his power inside his body. The king wonders if the hero is implying that he took the blow on purpose. Sig smiles, but suddenly starts coughing up blood. He then confirms that he did and explains that it must be because the mana that has been dormant for 500 years is very powerful. Dimitri comments that everyone has a natural trait that suits their body, and that taking power and mana from another person is not enough. Rather, it triggers a defense mechanism within the body. Sig doesn't care and lunges at the king, saying that revenge is tenfold. He also says that he only needs to be strong enough to endure the pain he will inflict. Thus, the two swords clash. The king struggles to withstand the hero's attack, but is eventually thrown back, wondering how his strength has suddenly increased so much. Dimitri jumps up and says that even so, it is a technique that destroys the user's body and believes that he must just hold out until his opponent's mana dries up. However, the hero anticipates the king's movement and appears behind him, ready to strike, delivering a powerful blow, causing a huge explosion. The king is thrown away, and as he is thrown, he realizes that it is not just power, but also speed. Sig prepares again and rushes towards the king with his explosive vision attack, which rushes towards the king, who is shocked when it passes right by his head. Sig laughs and wants to know why the king is doing this, and if he didn't say he would honor the will of the Carbon Kingdom. Dimitri gets angry when he hears this. Then the hero notices something and sees the king counterattacking with his ability. Dimitri yells at the hero not to interfere in his country. An enormous power begins to be released from the king, who moves at incredible speed and almost lands a blow to the hero's face. While dodging the king's attacks, the hero believes that he can now see the enemy's movements, something that was impossible before, but now he has reached that level. Dimitri prepares for his final attack and shouts that what he is protecting is the will of the Carbon Kingdom itself. Then he strikes and tells Seg to receive his power and attacks. The hero prepares himself and watches the powerful blow heading towards him. He begins to intensify his own power even more and thinks that even holding his sword is painful, but he wonders why this is so. As he launches his counterattacks, he knows that the ecstasy he feels makes him believe he can achieve anything. Then he uses his explosive sword technique, the dragon, unleashing a series of attacks around the king. As Dimitri takes powerful blows, he believes he cannot die there. He begins to think of Aranite. Then he remembers when she asked him to love everything in the kingdom of Carbon. She begged him to protect the kingdom of Carbon so that the view she saw at that time would remain unchanged. She turned and said that one day, everyone would recognize the value of that country, which now lay completely destroyed. He believes that all he wanted was to protect what she asked of him. Seg points his sword at the king and asks if he has any last words. Dimitri laughs and declares that the kingdom of Carbon can only survive if it is ruled his way, and that if the hero does not care about destroying his father, then he should finish him off there. But he wants to know if the hero can really make that decision, because the fate of those who believe in Carbon rests solely on his shoulders. Seg prepares for his final blow, and as he strikes, he declares that a country that can only survive by selling its citizens is better off destroyed. Then he turns around as soon as he hears someone calling him. It is Princess Nias, who stands in disbelief at the chaotic scene, seeing her father completely decapitated. The princess then begins to remember the first time the hero saved her and how. As soon as he carried her in his arms, he asked her if she was okay and if she had any injuries. She remembered his unusual gray eyes, looking as if he knew everything. At that moment, she thought to herself that she wanted to try to reach his emptiness with her hands. She also remembers running when she heard that the hero of coordination had returned. She ran to him, thinking that he had finally changed his mind about staying in the kingdom of carbon so that she could color his soul. However, when she arrived, she was devastated by what she saw. He had just killed her father. Nyas began to scream loudly and then collapsed to her knees, asking why Seg had done this, since his mission was to explore and clear the group. Seg simply replied that he had completed the mission. Nyas screams, asking if that insignificant task was really important. Then she becomes angry and continues to scream, wanting to know if her father really committed a crime worthy of death. Sage calls out to the princess and asks her if her father's victims would think the same way, and if she could say the same thing in front of those victims who will carry their wounds and live disfigured for the rest of their lives. He explains that no matter how much she complains, her father's sin will not disappear. She becomes angry and tries to grab the hero's sword, but he notices and grabs her by the shoulder, asking what she is doing. She begs him to use the sword he used to kill her father to kill her too, explaining that if she tries to save her father through some sacrifices, everyone who benefits from the sins he committed becomes an accomplice to the crime. She begins to scream, begging the hero to kill her and condemn all of Carbon because, among them, the only one who is not wrong is Sig. Sig becomes serious and wants to know if she really thinks he can't do it. Then he tightens his grip on her neck. She begins to laugh in a sensual way, saying that gratitude doubles and revenge multiplies tenfold, and asks if that isn't his principle. He is shocked to hear this and throws her forcefully to the ground, saying that it makes no sense. She remarks that it was to be expected because he is kind, after all. She then says that if he doesn't kill everyone in the country, he should stay in Carbon and join her. After all, buying and selling your own people is just human culture. She asks if she is wrong. Sig turns with an evil look and throws something near her. She quickly sees that it is the brooch she had given him. Sig explains to the princess that if the country has no money, it should sell the brooch and not trade in people. He says this and leaves. Shortly after, several guards run up to the princess, asking if she is okay, and if they should arrest the hero and execute him immediately. She replies, "No, everything is fine." One of the guards asks why, since she is crying so much. While crying over her father's body, she orders them to prepare the funeral and make it as grand as possible. Then she caresses the king's face, takes the crown, and says that as soon as the funeral is over, they will immediately begin her coronation ceremony. And so, she places her father's crown on her head, explaining that many changes will take place in the kingdom from now on. Later, the hero travels with Jenin, who says he was fighting alongside Valencia against the intruders who invaded the palace and died. Seg comments that the end of a criminal has been recorded with great honor. The dwarf turns around and says there was no other choice, because if the truth came out, all of Carbon would have been turned upside down. Seg agrees, and adds that it would have even affected Sigmar, where the tigers live. Jenin says he is a little sad, but he is truly grateful to the hero. He replies that it wasn't really necessary to go that far, and that, in the end, he's a little tired from all this. He laughs and wants to know what he can do for the hero, since everyone there has received his services, so he asks for at least a small reward. The hero smiles slightly. Fiona comments that, by the way, it seems that the queen did not really send her followers. Sig replies that he thinks so, and that although she knows that her father's actions were crimes, she could not admit it. The fact that she has not yet taken revenge clearly shows that she certainly realizes this as well. However, Jenin emphasizes that he is concerned about Carbon's future because the first thing she did after taking the throne was to create an army. Sig says that the intention is very clear, as it means that a war will break out soon. After walking for a while, night falls, and everyone stops, lights a fire, and puts something on the grill. Once it is ready, Manhwa takes a good piece of meat and says it is delicious. The hero wants to know if it really tastes good. She replies, yes, and that it is cooked very well. The hero then turns and asks Yui what she thinks. She says, a little sadly, that it's fine, but Sig comments that she doesn't seem fine. He says that she is actually worried about him because there was a dangerous situation, and he didn't even realize it, and that, in addition, he had promised before. Sig feels embarrassed and apologizes, but Sui continues, saying that he said that before parting with the dwarf Jenin. Then she grabs his clothes and says that he declared that a war would break out soon. So she asks him to please protect himself first, even if it is dangerous to use it before anything else. She insists that she must do so, even if she has to become the sword that hurts others. At that moment, Minerva speaks up and tells Suyi that she is very worried. She then explains that if Sage is in danger, she will rush to protect him first. The hero turns around and wants to know what she can do, which makes her angry. but she says she will show her true power when he decides to use it. Sage comments that he has no intention of using it and that she is just trying to take advantage. She gets angry and asks if he really doubts her. Sui then asks where they are going next. While Minerva has a bump on her head, the hero replies that he still doesn't know because he is thinking about it since the consequences of justice have not yet healed. He also thinks about seeing Frederick, the Punisher's ability, which is a forced physical activation, and that he has heard that the more pain a person endures, the greater their power becomes. But he wants to know if that means that great power comes with great pain. As he looks at his trembling hand with a click, he needs to rest in a quiet place for now. So he asks the two if they like resorts, which leaves them very confused. Evergreen, despite its small size, is a rich country that has grown through mediation and trade. Although it is located between powerful countries, since it has never been invaded from outside, people refer to Evergreen as the best country to live in. Sage expects that if it is a resort like the one in Evergreen, there will be no worries about getting involved in troublesome matters. So, he tells the two that they have arrived at the best country to live in. However, something sinister happens around them, and Sui wants to know if this is really the best country to live in. The hero is surprised, doesn't understand much, and quickly begins to wonder how this is happening until he turns around to see a warrior running towards him, saying, "Danger is coming." The warrior continues to run frantically, and as soon as he approaches the hero, he says it's a long story, but they are in trouble and will evacuate everyone first. Sig is terrified when he sees a huge dragon destroying the entire kingdom. The warrior continues to run and asks the hero if he understands now. Sig realizes that the reason Evergreen, a small and weak nation, has been able to avoid invasions from foreign enemies is because the area surrounding Evergreen is dragon territory. 500 years ago, the dragon slayer Aaron Greenfield reduced their numbers to the brink of extinction, and that the name of the dragon, with its long life, incredible magical power, and high level of intelligence, is still strong enough to defend against foreign invasions. As they flee the area, the hero asks if the country did not have a treaty with the dragons. The warrior, in despair, says that there may be a problem with the non-aggression pact, and that the dragons have recently begun invading the roads near the border. However, the adults still have not taken any appropriate action. Sage wants to know if this is why, as a knight, he couldn't stand by and watch, and instead began evacuating people. He answers yes, and then introduces himself as Carl Alexander, commander of the Shadow Knights. He then asks for the hero's name. The hero introduces himself, leaving Carl very surprised, asking if he is the hero of condemnation because he has heard of his bad reputation. He then asks if he is there to kill someone. Sig runs, looking up and seeing the dragon right in front of him, and says that before getting into that conversation, the knight must first take care of his own life. The dragon prepares for its attack, and the knight becomes very anxious. He tells the hero to get out of there and go to a safe area. However, he is distracted when he sees the hero disappear. At that moment, the dragon launches its powerful attack, destroying everything in its path. Carl sees the attack approaching and panics, but Sig calls out to Sui and creates a huge ice shield, trying to repel the dragon's attack, while the dragon thinks that the humans in front of him are using strange techniques. Then, he thinks that his mission is complete, and he has no further obligations. So, it flies away at full speed. The knight falls to the ground. Sig approaches and asks if he is okay. Carl gets angry and wants to know why the hero left him there. Sig explains to the knight that he must take care of his own life. Carl sighs and says he expected this because the hero has a bad reputation, as he has heard, but he says it's okay. People from the village begin to appear because of the smoke and immediately want to know what happened with the dragon. Carl begins to laugh and says that as long as he can protect the townspeople, that's all that matters. But as he says this, he is hit on the head with an egg. People begin to yell that he is a tax thief and a fraud, which makes him very embarrassed. They continue to yell and throw things at the knight, demanding that he return everything he took, and saying that he is just an incompetent knight. An old man says that the knight told them they would be safe if they hid in the shelter. Carl goes to the old man and apologizes, asking him to calm down first. But the old man asks if he is serious now. Sui asks Minerva why people are acting this way. Minerva asks if Sui doesn't understand the situation because now that the danger is gone, they need someone to blame. Seg affirms that the knight saved their lives, so now they are demanding compensation and may even ask for money to rebuild the village. The people become more agitated and want to know how the knight will take responsibility. At that moment, someone appears, shouting, wanting to know what they are doing to the captain. It is Shinwall, the deputy captain of the Shadow Knights, who continues to shout that they should be grateful for saving their lives. He then asks the captain if he wants to go somewhere. Carl takes a deep breath and says he is fine and thanks Mr. Shin. The old man walks away and says that they have finally shown up, calling them tax thieves and explaining that since they failed to protect them, they must rebuild the village and leave. Some guards call out to the old man and explain that if he has complaints about the Shadow Knight's relief efforts, he must file a formal petition. People begin to whisper loudly, wondering if these so-called knights have just threatened them, especially after they barely survived a dragon attack. The deputy commander begins to get angry and yells, calling the villagers ungrateful bastards and saying that only Commander Carl anticipated and prepared for the dragon's attack. He explains that thanks to Carl's suggestion and ingenious plan, everyone there survived the dragon's attack. The people still dislike the tone used and start throwing things at them again, shouting and asking what they want them to do. If they want to protect something, they must protect it properly. The hero begins to wonder if the knight had actually predicted the timing and path of the dragon's attack. Looking at him, he believes that the knight has great ability despite his appearance. Shin, still very angry, comments that they shouldn't have helped people like that in the first place. Carl asks the deputy commander to stop and explains that people are just worried. He then shouts that especially in times like these, the knight must devote himself to saving people. He then begins to fantasize, imagining people thanking him and calling him a hero. So he says that people will eventually recognize them and know that Shadow Knights exist all over the world. The hero approaches the knight and asks him if he still trusts and believes in people despite everything he has been through. Carl turns around and replies that of course he does, but he doesn't trust anyone. However, pointing to his friends, he affirms that he trusts them completely. Shane feels proud to hear his commander's praise, and replies that it is good to have at least one person who believes in them. Carl starts laughing and says that at least this time, everyone has clear achievements. Then suddenly, someone is arrested. It is the commander himself, who is confused, and asks why he is being taken to the disciplinary committee meeting room. Sage thinks to himself that this was to be expected because he knows that Evergreen has been a peaceful place for a long time. It is also clear that they covered up the problem because it is naturally more familiar than solving it. Drake Allen, Prime Minister of the Kingdom of Evergreen, tells Carl Alexander that many petitions have been filed against him. He asserts that if the Death Knight had not been there would have been significant casualties. He then explains the charges, which are false disclosure of facts, spreading misinformation, destruction of property, and threatening civilians. The old man wants to know if the knight has any counterarguments to consider regarding these charges. One of the ministers calls out to the old man and says that from the beginning, the Shadow Knights have been a troublemaking group. While Carl is stunned by such accusations about himself, the minister suggests dismissing all the disgraced knights once and for all. Another minister agrees, saying that the pressing issue at hand is the dragons, and that instead they should seek support from the neighboring kingdom of Cad. Another minister objects, saying that he does not know what these people will ask for and suggests that it would be better to seek help from Daya. He then explains that this is where the core of misery from the 5 extreme points is located. He then asks if the other is suggesting calling in an army to catch a fox. Someone tries to calm everyone down and asks for a moment of silence. He then turns and says he would like to hear His Majesty's opinion first, who asks where they plan to seek support. This is Peter Evergreen, King of the Kingdom. He says he is reluctant to bring foreign troops into the country. The old man gets angry and pounds the table with his fist. Then he stands up and asks how long he plans to remain hesitant. Then he begs him to engage in politics with a broader perspective. Then he shouts that as long as they leave this man without action, the people will suffer forever, and that now is the time to determine who they can trust. Seg continues to think that this person is trying to rely on the power of others without even trying because he believes that the moment foreign troops from another country enter Evergreen, the center of the continent, the place will cease to be the best country to live in and will become the continent's battlefield. As he watches the hesitant king, he concludes that the weak king is nothing more than a scarecrow. He suspects that the one who sold out and betrayed the country is most likely the Prime Minister. Since there is nothing else to be seen, he fears that Evergreen, the best place to live, will soon fall. So, he turns around, calls out to the two, and says that the atmosphere there is not good. Manhwa wants to know why they have to leave now, especially since the argument is getting interesting. Then, Seg hears someone suggest forming a force to eliminate the dragons. The person who suggested this is the prince of the country, Kane Evergreen, who asserts that if they defeat the dragons, they will be able to protect the country's sovereignty and earn more money. Sui and Manhwa want to know why Sig suddenly stopped and if something happened. Everyone is shocked by the prince's suggestion and asks him to explain. Then suddenly, everyone starts laughing loudly, saying that the prince knows nothing and continues to mock him. Drake explains to the prince that the kingdom of Evergreen is not a powerful nation, and that the kingdom does not have reserve forces to use to exterminate dragon. He then shouts, wanting to know if they plan to capture the dragon with their own strength and if the prince would like to try by chance. The king apologizes to his son and says that it is all his fault for being incompetent and incapable. Cain gets angry and asks his father what will happen to the kingdom from now on. His father suggests that instead of perishing at the hands of the dragon, it might be better for the people to become subjects of another country. At that moment, Cain remarks that it is still too early to give up. He then steps forward and explains that if the king is in trouble because of the dragon, he will help him defeat it. Everyone begins cheering for the warrior of death. Then the hero grabs Carl and says that instead, he would like to lend the king a hand. The commander of the Dark Knights is confused, trying to understand why he chose for such a task. Meanwhile, in Drake Allen's office, he thinks that the plan has gone wrong because he fears that if these people manage to kill the dragon, there will be no reason to go through the trouble of using sound magic to incite the dragon to attack Evergreen. He believes that, despite being equipped with abundant resources and supplies, and its strategic location on the continent, the weak royal family in Evergreen has made no effort to develop the country beyond its current state. As for the idea that the country is the best place to live, he knows that this is just empty talk that makes people lazy. What Evergreen needs now is a revolution. A revolution accompanied by bloodshed. Drake tells someone that in the end, what they need is an army because bringing dragons to the country has proven to be useless. The person he is talking to comments that the country's prime minister seems very worried and wants to know if Drake is really afraid now. Drake becomes serious and declares that his only concern is the future of Evergreen, nothing else. He then asks if Artemis heard what he just said because he hopes she won't try to provoke him. She drinks, asks permission to leave, and assures him that she is only concerned that unnecessary worries may hinder the revolution. Drake comments that this means they need to get rid of unnecessary variables. He also points out that they should speed up the revolution instead of relying on foreign armies, and that they will mobilize their own forces. Artemis stands up and says that they will deploy the S-class mercenaries they hired. She turns around and explains that she will definitely reward him when he becomes king. But before that, she has a question. She asks why he thinks she supports him. She answers that his hypocrisy and greed attracted her. Then she approaches him, and he understands the contradiction of sacrificing the present for the sake of the future. The old man says, somewhat uncertainly, that the revolution must be for the rebirth of the country. Artemis shows an evil expression and says that this is just a big excuse, and that he knows it too, and that he must be honest about his true desires. The old man is very surprised by this and quickly remembers when he said that his wish was to make the country strong. However, he knew that he had to become king first. Artemis asks if he doesn't want to set the world on fire with her. He becomes a little scared and stammers, saying that maybe he wants something like that, but then wonders if that is what he really desires. She answers, yes, that she can make it all happen and that she will give him everything and do anything for him to become the king of Evergreen. The old man starts yelling, asking if she wants money, the nation, the people, his body, and his soul. She answers that she doesn't care about his tired and fragile body, and that moving forward without worrying about anything is enough. Artemis suggests that it would be best for him to start a war immediately once he becomes king, and that he should throw himself into the fire like a moth, letting his kingdom burn with it so that his desires become an offering and sacrifice for his master's growth. Drake is deeply moved by these words and immediately responds that he accepts and declares that he will serve her. Meanwhile, in the Duran Mountains in Evergreen, the hero is with several other Dark Knights. Carl suddenly starts laughing, saying that since he was little, he has always admired knights and wants to become someone like the Steel Knight Albert Frederick. Monero mocks him and comments that it is an exaggerated dream for someone who has not even managed to become a knight. Seg takes a deep breath and says that he knows that very well. Shin hears this, gets angry, and yells at them to watch their words. Sui approaches Minerva and says he wants to tell her something. Meanwhile, the leader of the Dark Knights agrees with Minerio and says he also thinks it's an ambitious dream for Carl. He then explains that the Dark Knights are a group of people who have been expelled from various knight orders and that they follow other knights like shadows, providing them with support. Carl asks Manhwa if she can't dream of becoming a hero too, instead of just a supporter. She doesn't care and tells him to do whatever he wants. He feels a little embarrassed and says that, in any case, it seems that the rumors he heard are true about a suspicious man who only travels with young girls and is one of the 5 great warriors who kill anyone who disturbs them. But he wants to know if it's true that this man is related to Queen Amelia. Manhwa starts laughing and yells that there isn't a single word of truth in what the knight just said. This makes the hero angry. He then punches Manhwa in the head, knocking her hard to the ground. Seeing this, Carl comments that the hero is indeed a hero of condemnation. Seg turns around and asks the blonde boy if he knows why he is there. He replies, yes, and that it must be because the hero needs their help to catch the dragon. He believes that even when looking at them individually, each member's skills surpass most of the knights. So he suggests that if the hero of condemnation and he cooperate, they could theoretically defeat the dragon. Sig answers no and insists that he does not need their help. only information about the dragon, which upsets all the knights for being rejected so easily. Sig thinks the group in front of him is noisy and wants to gather information and take advantage of the opportunity to get rid of them. He then says that the knight claimed to have already predicted the timing and path of the dragon's attack, and asks how he did that. Carl says he researched the relevant materials and memorized all 12 books. The hero wants to know if he really memorized them all. The knight explains that with information, nothing is impossible in this world. He then explains that since ancient times, it has been said that in places filled with magical power, there are other dimensions and beings from different dimensions, and that many monsters have appeared around the problematic mass similar to dragons. Where there are many monsters, there are dragons. In other words, he points out that they just need to follow the map they are looking at, which shows the locations of all the monsters near Evergreen. They can go and walk through the dragon's lairs, which is like heading to the mountain behind the palace. He then asks if the hero still says he doesn't need his help. Sig hugs the knight and laughs, commenting that the map marked with dragon locations contains truly amazing information. The knight feels embarrassed and asks if the hero accepts him as a companion. Sig replies, yes, and that with the information he has, it seems they may indeed be able to capture the dragons. Carl is delighted and says it is an honor to be alongside the great hero. However, the hero takes the knight's map and asks to take a quick look. The knight panics and asks the hero to wait a moment. He then exclaims that there is only one map, so he must be very careful. Sig gets ready, and while Minerva holds his cloak, he asks if the lights are ready. After she answers yes, he jumps away using his explosive step ability, leaving the captain and vice captain looking like fools, wondering if they should go back. As soon as they land, the hero comments that they have come too far and that this seems like a good place. Sui wants to know how Sig can steal something from people who have worked hard to obtain it. Minerva asks Sui if she can't understand the situation because, in the end, the hero decided to abandon the hero's path and become a highwayman. She barely finishes saying this when she receives a hard slap on the head. The hero replies that this is not the case and explains that the reason he took the map was actually to save these men. Sui is confused and asks him to explain more clearly. Sig says that the map in his hands could bring destruction to Evergreen. The two become very frightened and want to know if the map can really cause such a thing. Therefore, the hero emphasizes that the map does not show the location of the dragon that attacked the country, because he knows that if someone unnecessarily disturbs other dragons, it will only increase the number of dragons they will have to deal with. So, everything will turn into a sea of fire at that point. He also emphasizes that the map is not something that can be solved with enthusiasm alone. Since he minimized the danger, he believes that the Shadow Knights will be grateful one day. C is excited and wants to know if he can then find out where the dragon that attacked the country island. Sig takes a deep breath and replies in the affirmative, saying that Carl was only trying to see the forest, and not the trees because he relied solely on data without an intuitive sense of his surroundings. Minerva seems a little confused by all this. Sig points out that to find what is hidden in the forest, you must first look at the trees. He then asks if they see all the fallen trees leaning in the same direction, as these are signs of the dragon's wanderings since its appearance. He then bends down and remarks that there are even burn marks caused by the dragon's heat, and that by combining this evidence with the information on the map, he concludes that only one creature could have left such traces. He thus confirms that there is no doubt that the dragon that attacked the country is nearby. Seo is completely amazed by the hero's intelligence. However, he says that it is just a simple analysis, and that for now they will camp there and explore the dragon's exact location. The next day, night falls, and around the campfire, the hero looks closely at the map. Then Minerva wakes up and says she has a question for him. She gets up and wants to know why he trusts Sai so easily, but she seems hesitant when it comes to trusting her. So she becomes serious and also wants to know if he is still afraid. He answers yes and wants to know how he can trust someone who tried to kill him. Minerva gets very angry but quickly calms down and says she's not trying to make excuses because she didn't specifically mean to kill him. She then explains that the black magic sword amplifies the power and emotions of its wielder, but the excess emotions from the power also flow into the black sword, and she had no control over her emotions, and that this was not what she wanted. She then says that she has always lived this way, but the moment she met him, everything changed, even though it wasn't the most pleasant first encounter. So, she approaches the hero, rests her head on his shoulder, and confirms that even so, thanks to him being the darkness of the sword, her heart and mind are now at peace. She no longer hides this feeling from anyone, and Seo also does not need to remain sad alone. Seo hears everything Minerva has just said. Minerva continues to explain that she does not intend to kill the hero and only asks him to trust her more. Then she wants to know if he understands. He takes a deep breath and wants to know what he could have answered based on her actions. She gets very angry and attacks him, calling him a rude and arrogant servant. Sig tries to defend himself while she continues to yell, wanting to know why he doesn't take her seriously. But he replies that he is not joking and that he is answering seriously. Minerva turns around, yells, "I see," and asks her to respond to something. Seo says she thinks Sig is a very nice person. Minerva gets even more angry and yells, wanting to know why she is defending him. Then Seo confirms that whenever she feels his touch, she feels something different. Because while he may seem cold and rude on the outside, she can feel the warmth inside him. Sig looks at Minerva and asks her if that's enough for her. Minerva becomes even more agitated and continues to attack him, saying that even if she has to, she will make him use her. She then turns to the sword and screams for him to accept her willingly. The hero is concerned, throws the sword away, and asks her to calm down for a moment. However, the sword hits something and breaks the subspace they are in. Minerva ends up buried in the ground inside a kind of cave. As rocks fall on her head, she tries to understand what just happened. The hero comments that the illusion magic has long since faded. Seo asks if they have really been in front of the dragon's lair all this time. Minerva clenches her fist and starts yelling, wanting to know if they saw her skill, but Sig says it was just a coincidence. The hero begins to analyze the ground and believes that there was an illusory, magical formation like the one Minerva learned some time ago, and that the spell was high level, capable of removing any sense of perception and presence. He then concludes that he never expected the dragon's magic to be removed so easily. Looking at Minerva, he reconsiders his thoughts, believing that she might be really useful after all. Seo says that she is absolutely amazing and that from now on, she will call her Queen General Minerva. Sig comments that she was very effective. She asks him to praise her more because he was too stingy. Then they begin to enter the cave. While doing so, the hero thinks that the owner of the cave seems like a very greedy man because he defeated all the surrounding monsters to claim the cave for himself. With that, he concludes that the dragon will soon discover that the illusion spell has been broken. Therefore, it is best to start patrolling and request reinforcements immediately. However, he wonders why Minerva is still acting like the leader. She replies that the only one eager to find the entrance first is the leader, so she runs off and asks him to follow her. Sig yells at her not to do that and to come back immediately. Then he tells Seo that he thinks it's best for her to stay by his side. She agrees and says she will. The hero feels a little embarrassed and apologizes to Seo, asking if she is also worried because he didn't use her. She replies that his black magic swords are tools for awakening and penetration, and if they are not seen as useful, it is natural for one to feel upset. The hero tries to explain, but Seo turns away and says he doesn't need to say anything else because she is connected to him, and she knows he is careful with them because he cares. The hero ponders this for a moment. Seo says that he has become kind again, just as he was before. At that moment, Minerva appears, shouting that she is back. Sig wants to know if she has discovered anything. She says she saw things she never imagined. Then she tells them that deep behind the darkness, deep in the heart of the cave, there is a pile of treasures, stacked like a mountain. While petting a dragon, she says she found that too. Sig gets angry and wants to know why. After all this time searching, she just says she brought a dragon. She tries to explain that it was when she discovered the cursed dragon's treasure and that the dragon already knows, but she laughs and says it's okay because in the end they have the red dragon sword. Sig hits her head hard and calls her a fool. Then he wants to know if she touched the treasure. Seo says she heard that the dragon would never forgive anyone who dared to touch its treasure. Minerva insists that she would never do such a thing. However, her clothes are stuffed with treasures. Seg then concludes that there is only one way to resolve the situation. He turns upside down and asks the dragon to have mercy on them, saying that if that doesn't work, they will try to resolve the matter through dialogue. Seo remarks that she does not believe this will work. Then, she becomes very frightened of something. The dragon wants to know if he is not the human who blocked himself at that time, and even broke his carefully designed illusion spell, and that if the hero were a thief or a murderer, he would have already killed him, but he believes he must show mercy to gifted humans. Minerva seizes the opportunity and urges the hero to return to Evergreen. The dragon agrees and tells the hero to return there so that he can be killed on the day he attacks Evergreen again, because he might enjoy watching his futile resistance. Sig thanks the dragon for his understanding and says they will leave because he knows that escape is the top priority. However, Minerva's clothes get caught on a rock and fall to the ground, spilling all of the dragon's treasure, which angers him. He then roars and calls them all thieves. Sig asks Minerva when she said she wanted him to see her abilities. He then grabs her and says that now is the time he wants to see them. So, he prepares to throw her. As he throws her toward the dragon, he explains that everything that is happening is because of her actions, and now she has to deal with it herself. The dragon becomes even more enraged and calls them bastard humans, saying that they use their own people as bait. Manhwa just yells that the hero will pay with his life for doing this. So, Manhwa transforms into the demon sword and lunges at the dragon, who remarks that this won't be enough, but is quickly surprised by something and ends up getting hit by the sword. The dragon then unleashes a powerful burst of fire and says he will never forgive them. Sig sees the attack coming and tells Suyi to run like there's no tomorrow. Meanwhile, at the Shadow Knights camp somewhere in the Doradun Mountains, Carl sits deep in thought. One of the knights approaches and asks how long they will wait for the hero of condemnation. He takes a deep breath and says that for now, they will trust him a little longer. He then asserts that his disappearance definitely has a different meaning. However, he believes he cannot be sure of that because for those who believed in him, followed him, and trusted him, the hero of condemnation took away their last hope, and he cannot even figure out what to do, and cannot tell the other knights that. Therefore, he gets angry and starts taking off his equipment. He then says that if that is the case, they will simply eliminate the knights. Another knight asks what good a leader is if he is not smart and cannot understand the situation. Carl asks Daryl to calm down for a moment, but he cannot and shouts even louder, asking how he can remain calm in this situation, since this damn hero took the only way they had to regain their honor and ran away. He then yells that he has ruined everything and asks why he can't say that out loud, perhaps because he is ashamed and embarrassed in front of his friends. Another knight says that this is not the problem and that they will just act like mercenaries. He believes that Daryl is doing this because he is worried about their leader, since they have been working hard for everyone, but are treated like nothing in the end. Carl is moved after hearing this and asks if they are sure. They hug the leader and shout that yes, they will continue to follow him. Shane says that even though he is not a knight, he wants to know if living for honor is not enough. Carl agrees and says that in that case, they are Shadow Knights, but he is interrupted by a huge explosion behind them. The knights immediately start shouting that the dragon has reappeared, and judging by its roar, it seems to be injured. Shin says he thinks the hero of condemnation took the map and is heading straight for the dragon. Carl says that with a hero of this caliber, they can at least try, and that while the others fight each other, they will cooperate and deliver the final decisive blow. At that moment, all the knights shout that it's amazing that he planned all this. He remains stunned, trying to understand what the hell is going on. Then the Shadow Knights raise their arms and shout that they will advance.